I mean, yeah. Welcome, You Don't Know podcast here in April. What the fuck is it? 11th. We're talking about Epstein. Instead of like the Sunday thing, Epstein today only. But yeah, we're talking about the Melania Trump thing, and I have surprise a hot take on this, which is that it feels very much like we could be seeing something of a foil being drawn up to stop everybody talking about the war, Iran, some other things, the terrible poll numbers that Donald Trump's getting, and like I was saying before we went on air here, I think that the whole Epstein thing is very sad because both sides have used it as political football, as a way to dig at the other side and say, hey, you don't care enough about women's rights, you don't care enough about kids' rights, you're a part of the conspiracy, you're part of this, you're part of that, right? And we've seen it on both sides. We've seen them attack each other repeatedly over this shit. And every time we get a release, we see a bunch of people hanging out with a sleazy douchebag named Epstein on both sides of the aisle through all kind of different industries and governments. But we don't see actual actionable evidence of crimes being committed by any of those people. So you see Bill Clinton in a hot tub, in the thing, he gets hauled before the Congress. He says I was at, in he's in like UAE or something like that. And it was like a hotel floor and there's a bunch of people in there. It's a random photo that got snapped, right? Like the problem with the files from what I've seen, like Melania Trump mentioned it when she was talking about it, her email to, what's her name? Ghislaine Maxwell, right?
Ghislaine.
Like they were such influential and powerful people that they had connections to a shit ton of people. And not all of those were related to sexual abuse or any of these things. And so like proving culpability in any of that is, I think, probably almost impossible, especially with statute of limitations, especially with like how long ago. I mean, we're talking about shit that happened back in like 2006, 2008, 2010, right? Like this is very old. And most of this ends up boiling down to like, I am saying this happened and this victim, and not really having any proof to back that up, other than corroborating stories that this is in fact like a true thing. So I don't think it didn't happen. I think it 100% did happen, and it was disgusting, and they should prosecute the shit out of everyone that they can. But I would make an assumption based on little evidence, which is what we do here on the You Don't Know podcast, is that there actually isn't that much more in there, right? Like the stuff that is in there can damage people's reputations, but you're not going to get convictions out of it. There isn't some treasure trove of like a Rolodex of like, sex offenders and people who were like ordering women online based on, like a full ledger of like transactions and all this sort of thing.
And why wouldn't they release the rest of it if it's just more of the same?
So part of the reason they don't want to release it is because of that reputational damage. Like, even though it's not a criminal thing, you do see a lot of reputational damage. The whole incident with like Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, even Melania Trump, like, and that's why, like, another hot take is that when they said we're redacting victims' names, they were using a very, very broad sense of that term to mean anyone whose reputation might also be hurt, thus them being a victim, right? So like if there is a proof of wrongdoing and your name is in the file, we'll redact it because you too are a victim. So like there's a legitimate claim that they're hiding things to protect people's reputations where there isn't actual evidence of criminal wrongdoing, right? And like that's fucked up. And we should, like, look, if you were involved with the sleazebag, you should have to answer for it and say like why you were in it, and like fucking, make a thing. Be like, hey, look, I went to a fundraiser and he was there and somebody took a photo of me. You know what I mean? Like,
but that only works if you're not Republican.
What?
Because clearly it was something that like Melania was like, hey, listen, they were at the same party, right? Ghislaine Maxwell and that's what's his name? Epstein was also at the party. Mm-hmm. And because they were photographed together at the same party, now they're in cahoots, right?
Well,
and people can run off of that and say whatever they want online and say, oh, well, look at this. They're best friends. They're this and this and that.
But let me point out the fact that was the same thing that happened to liberals. That people still say that Bill Clinton is involved with Epstein, right? Like,
well, there are a lot more details with Clinton with the plane rides and how many times he visited.
He was friends with him. There's a ton of evidence that Donald Trump was friends with him and all kinds of things, right? Like, my point here isn't like when you look at it objectively and you're trying not to be political about this, it's on both sides, right? Both sides have accused the other.
Right.
Both sides have used this as evidence, and they don't really give a shit about the victims who actually got fucked over in this situation, and they're just kind of using it to because they realize. I think the value of Epstein, the whole debacle to the political class, is that it is an instant rev people to 100 name drop, right? Like, and that's hugely valuable in politics. Like,
Right.
rage baiting people and getting people engaged based off of their suspicion or hate or anger or these sorts of things is like bread and butter for politics in these days. And it's a very low hanging fruit, easy thing to do to just throw that out and let people get obsessed about it, right? And either use it to try to get people to vote for you because hey, the other side is the villainous ones that are culpable and connected to all these things, and we need to get them out because we'll expose the corruption on the other side, yada yada yada. Or I said, if you know there really isn't any factual damaging things inside of there, right? You use it as like let's bring it up to distract people from shit, right? Let's put it back in the focus of the news and the focus of the people to get people talking about this because we know they will. And added benefit, I know my name's not in there. I know there really isn't anything that's going to hurt anybody in here. So it's just a great foil to use to throw up some smoke. You know what I mean? Like Melania could have come out at any time. They've been saying this about Melania for a long while, and she didn't. I may be wrong about this, but I don't think she like because she usually doesn't make public appearances and she usually doesn't actually make public statements either, unless they're very specific. And it
Well,
seemed,
didn't
I
they just
think,
close out some cases or whatever? She said that they had taken legal action successfully, and then they have to, like, publicly apologize, so maybe that was, like once that was, like, said and done, then she came out and
sure,
made a statement. That's
she,
my thinking of it anyways.
it's possible.
The
She seems
timing of
to
it is
be,
super weird and annoying that it just kinda came out of left field, the whole world's on fire,
when
and
you,
then, typical woman fashion, you come out and, it's like, "Oh, the whole world's on fire, but let me just clear my name in all this," right?
I,
Like
again, it seems I feel like she's too smart for that to be what it was. Looking at Melania and the way she's maneuvered and the way she's done things, it just doesn't feel like this would be a thing where she was completely oblivious to the timing and the whole White House staff and her staff and like everyone was just like, completely randomly taken aback by this. It feels like on some level it had to be coordinated. I'm not saying that like she doesn't feel that way or that this isn't something she wanted to get out there because it seems very in character. There were people that have worked for her before that says like, that they've worked with her and she is very protective of her brand and her image and will sue people and has sued people in the past for defaming her one way or the other, right? And this in particular is one that she's been talking about for a while. So it's not like she's making shit up just to distract people, but the timing of it does seem extremely suspicious. Like you could have waited until after the talks, got kicked off, right? But like right in like the very middle of it is like let's just throw this into the mix, right? And that just it feels too, hot take. It feels too suspicious for me to think that it wasn't coordinated at least a little bit to try to pull
yeah.
some heat with that.
What was she trying to say? That they should release everything, or that what? I mean,
She
what was the point of
so
her speech
she
or
had a
whatever?
couple points to say. One of them was I don't really know Epstein, that like the only thing I know of him was kind of like we were saying like she was a socialite, she would go to certain parties, he would be there, Ghislaine Maxwell as well, like even though she exchanged emails with her, they were the kind of polite socialite emails that class of people will send back and forth to each other. Like the email said something like, "Oh, I saw your picture in Vanity Fair. You look good. Like we should meet up when that time I'm in Florida." Right? Like no concrete plans, no anything there really, other than somebody of a social status networking and saying like, "Hey, that was cool. Like just like wanted to say hi," kind of a thing.
And supposedly there's, like, fake images, doctored images online circulating, and there's people making false claims about, their dealings and saying that she was a victim or saying that she was part of it and shit like that,
Yeah,
so
the,
there was a lot of that was going on apparently, and there was more, like, specific players, and I forget who were the 3 people that she named that have to publicly apologize as part of the suit, that she filed, that
there
she
were
won. There were
Yeah,
3.
and there were
The Daily
specifically
Beast, I think, was one the Daily Beast, and then some other
yeah,
there's 2
there
other
were some news
people, yeah.
organizations from what I heard, yeah, and from what she in particular, like, the claim she seemed to be kind of trying to get ahead of is that, Epstein introduced Melania to Donald Trump. Like, that
Oh, that
is the
too.
thing that
Yeah.
that defames her and defames Donald Trump, and that's I think is the one that in particular they're trying to go after people for like propagating that because the only evidence that anyone ever had of that is on like one FBI agent's notes where he was interviewing like an employee of one of theirs who wrote down in their notes that like this person was essentially saying that's what happened. But like no one has corroborated this. Like zero people who have ever known Donald Trump or Melania Trump have come forward and said Epstein introduced Melania. So like it's just not believable. It's not. You don't have any reason to believe this one random person who the comment taken out of context or even like it being something that they heard once, right? Like somebody being interviewed with the FBI who's like one time I heard that this might be a thing, right? And like that then gets reported by news medias who are saying this definitely happened. Like we have concrete evidence that Melania was introduced by Epstein to Donald Trump, right? And the like if we get into what the legal argument would have to be, right, you then have to prove not only did the news agency say that that was fact, but that the news agency knew that it was unfactual and they were doing it maliciously to defame her, right? So like that's her claim. That's what she would go after them on. A lot of times in these kinds of cases, it's just cheaper to settle. So I would probably assume you see some settles or maybe some apologies or retractions, especially since the underlying accusation seems to be false and nobody's seriously, stating that except for some conspiracy theorists that are like Melania was, what Epstein's girls or whatever. So that was
Yeah,
what she was
plus they're
trying
going
to
up
get to
against
them.
a Trump, and they have, like, unlimited pockets, so it's like,
Yeah,
it behooves you to
it's
just
just gonna
even
end
if
up
it was or
losing.
wasn't, just to settle because, I mean, you
Well,
can't
and
lose.
and Melania and Trump will like they've proven like even if they're gonna lose, they're gonna bleed you in the courts. And so, like,
Mhm.
yes, sure, but they are happy to lose a shit ton of money if you lose a shit ton of money too, right? And so they'll take it all the way to prove a point and to drain you of money, and you could just settle for losing less money, right? And
Right.
do it out of court and make an apology, just move on from the thing, which is what they've done pretty repeatedly. But like that was her claims, and then at the very end of it, if I'm not mistaken, she made a uh, call to action from the Senate and the Congress, I think, essentially saying that every woman who is well, every victim of Epstein should be given a platform to a public testimony in the Senate. So up to now, that's not happened. And what she's saying is that the Senate should allow all of the victims to publicly testify in front of the American people to get whatever their stories are out there, right? So that they can be heard, is what she's saying. Now, even that you can take some hot takes from, which is kind of funny because, like, number one, victims always want to tell those stories very publicly, right? Like, they face a lot of backlash for that. That's pretty known thing that's out there, and you have to get there and speak about it. So, like, on some level, that saying like let them publicly testify is kind of like calling a bluff, right? It's like I don't think they're really going to do it, or most of them won't, or you're only going to get a few of them that actually want to do this. So, where's the exposure there, right? The other side of that is like they can publicly testify, but that still doesn't really do anything. That just lets them be heard by the Senate and by the American people. But again, there's not really any actionable thing that's going to be a knock-on effect of that, right? You're not going to see arrests. You're not going to see expulsions from the Senate or any like crazy thing like that, right? So
Not a trial.
yeah, it's another way to politically maneuver the events to try to come out on top. Which again, not picking on Melania Trump for this. Everyone has used this issue for that fact. And it continues to be kind of like a sad story that you had this horrible abuse, this horrible, seemingly just inhuman behavior of treating very, very young women and grooming them and doing all these things, going on for decades and tons of people at the very least being aware of it and doing fuck all about it. You know what I mean? So
Well,
that's yeah.
there are rumors that he was like a FBI informant of some sort, right? So, like, to
Hillary
release
Clinton, I
any
think, was the one that
information on,
floated
like,
that.
what he was doing and stuff like that would be, like, against national interest at some point. if you believe in those sort of things,
That
right?
it's one of those things. It's like this. I think it's called a straw man argument, where it's like you're proposing something that is very hard, if not impossible, to verify. And like, could it be true? Sure, yeah. I mean, yeah, that could be true. Is it likely? I mean, it doesn't seem so, right? With like all of the intense amount of focus on it to different administrations, like it feels weird. And who was he ratting
Well, the
on
fact that he was,
supposedly?
like, so closely tied to so many different political figures and so many other, like, from other countries as well, not just,
Hmm.
like, the United States. I mean, look at what happened to Prince was that guy Prince Andrews or
Andrew,
whatever?
yeah, Bruce
Andrew,
Andrew.
yeah.
But so the reason why he is super connected to everybody is he was a billionaire, right? Like, he had a shit ton of money, right? The funny thing about billionaires is that they're connected to every other billionaire, and they're connected to every government, especially ones that do business in all kinds of places, right? Like, it's not weird that Epstein had connections all over the world, especially if he was this kind of known go-to guy for a good time. You know what I mean? Like, it kind of like the P Diddy thing, right? Like, how many people went to P Diddy parties, and how many people were actually involved in the baby oil parties? You know what I mean? Like, there were thousands of people at those parties. He would invite everybody to those parties. It doesn't mean that every single one of them was in a back room with some baby oil getting down in a freak way. You know what I mean? Like, like the networking aspect of these people is bigger than whatever their particular, like, evil doings are, right? So it's not that weird that he has connections all over the world. It's not that weird that he would know a shit ton of people necessarily.
True. Well, on some other lighter, more, exciting news, right?
Oh,
It's we went to the moon and back to some
there.
degree, right?
But
Furthest
around,
we've
we went,
around the moon, not to the
we
moon
went,
on the surface,
we
but
went
still.
further than any human beings have ever gone into space. Like that. That
True.
is the record, that the big record that was broken. That human
Right.
beings traveled further than ever in history. Looking rad.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
that was cool.
that's freaking an awesome feat, that they were able to also land within, like, the second of, like, when they were expected to land, right, like, where they were supposed to land. That's insane amount of coordination.
Yeah, yeah, no, no, I watched, I think we all watched, at least, maybe after the fact, but the liftoff was truly, truly amazing. 50 years or so since the end of the Apollo missions, right? So it's the first time humans have been kind of focused on going back to the moon, in some degree. This one was supposed to be,
Right.
yeah, just fucking dope. Far
Got
side
that
of the
little
moon.
gem.
Yep. Yeah, that's, just absolutely wild. They had a ton of technology too, which was really cool. Like, if you went to NASA's, like, got the application from the app from NASA, or went to their
Mm,
website, they had some pretty cool, like, VR tools and stuff that you could, like, up to date track, like, where the capsule was in relation to, the moon and the Earth at any given time, like live updates and things like that. Like, all the photos, like, when they crashed, when they splashed down, and they were picking them up from the helicopter one by one, like, all of these things, being shot kind of live is really cool, and getting some very, very live updates from them as they were around the moon, was rad. You could even hear them making, like, scientific observations about the moon as they were approaching it, which was super interesting. But it does seem like this whole trip was about, testing the waters, right? This was the first time we'd ever been in that capsule. It was the first time we'd used a lot of those systems, and we're confirming that all of
right.
this stuff works. And then the next step, right, is going to be landing on the moon. So, like, this one was a huge success. Like, outside of the toilet kind of breaking down, it seemed like everything worked the way it should. They were able to launch. They were able to circle. They were able to come back. With zero, if little problem. So, like, it seems like it's all go ahead for more trips around the moon, some landings. I keep hearing, a base by the net, or the starting of the base in, the
Right.
next 2-3 years on the moon, which would be wild.
They're already talking about mining on the moon. Like
Mhm.
they're
That's why they
saying
wanna
that
go,
they
yeah.
have like way more, like 1,000 times more like minerals and rare earth minerals there than Greenland or something. So they're trying to mine it, and there's already like
Yeah,
economists looking at it,
yeah.
trying to figure out how to get a quick dollar from it.
Yeah, the big payload that is there that everybody knows is there is helium-3,
Helium
uh,
3.
which I believe helium-3, like, is extremely rare and difficult to kind of come by here on Earth, but on the moon,
Mm.
because of the lack of atmosphere, the temperatures and things like that, they think there's larger quantities of it. And I've heard people talking about, like, nuclear power plants on the moon for, the reason that you don't have to worry about radiation, right? You don't have to worry about a lot of these things. You can set up systems that are kind of much more interesting. I mean, solar farming on the moon, right? Like there's a lot of different things you could do to be a very like big interest to economies and businesses and general public. And then the bigger idea, of course, being that the moon becomes a gas station that we fly. You launch somebody up into the air, they go to what is essentially the moon orbit. They could even manufacture their technically. You're going to build a rocket. It's much easier to maybe build the rocket on the moon and get it off of the moon, or like some sort of a shuttle, not a rocket, but a shuttle between Earth and or the moon and Mars, right? So it becomes a way station to then start human exploration of the greater solar system, which is
Right.
fucking crazy. Sci-fi craziness, but apparently in our lifetimes we'll at least get to see the beginning of this for sure, which is
Well,
amazing.
hopefully. I mean, it took them so long to get started again, right? NASA was
Well,
essentially dead before SpaceX came along and kind of lit a fire under everyone's ass. And, at least got the ball rolling, at least got people excited about like space travel again and actually
You
did
should
something about it, right?
you should listen to Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about SpaceX. So SpaceX does a lot of things really amazingly, and they're all like crazy scientists that work there and that have done things that like no other agency has done.
Well,
But the
engineers mostly.
SpaceX, to a very large degree, if not entirely, is an extension of our government and of NASA. Like to say that SpaceX is its own thing is a really gross overstatement. Like the only reason that SpaceX is doing any of the things it's doing is because of the insane amounts of public funds it gets, right? Like,
Well, it gets
yeah,
government contracts for having created a
yes,
sufficient,
but that's
like an
but
efficient
so like
ways to get up into space.
I'm not downplaying NASA or
I think it
SpaceX's
gets
contribution.
40 or 60% of its funding from the government.
What I'm trying to say is that
I mean,
you don't, um, even back when NASA launched the Apollo missions, NASA didn't do that alone. NASA had Lockheed Martin, NASA had Boeing, NASA had other private companies that were helping them do this. Like SpaceX, the actual scientists and the people that run SpaceX don't like shit talk NASA and be like, fucking NASA doesn't, we're out here doing all the shit. And like only kind of dumb bros do that who have this weird thing that like SpaceX is somehow superior to NASA. Like you need NASA. SpaceX needs NASA. SpaceX also needs public funds. It couldn't do what it was doing without public funds. That's a fact. So like there is no world in which SpaceX is able to do all the things it does without public funding, without NASA support. So like, yes, they're
yeah.
super complementary.
I guess I
And
was wrong about the percentages of funding that SpaceX gets from the government. It's 5%.
5%.
Oh,
So
so
can
the
you
rest is
expand
it's revenue
on
from, Starlink. 95% of
sure.
its revenue is from Starlink and private launches.
Yeah, but so they were able to develop all of that based off of their government programs, right? And now they're
Initially, it was 80% funded by the government.
okay. So they were bankrolled by the government, and then they turned that into a very successful business. So again, they wouldn't exist without the
But
government.
they took the risks, right, initially to be able to
Well,
get that
no,
funding
he
because
took the
they
risk.
it wasn't
He
just
took
like, "Here,
80% of their funding
here's
and
free
gave it
money,
to
go develop
SpaceX.
a free and efficient way to get stuff into space."
I'm
They
not
they did
trying
it
to
on their own, and then they got the funding.
I'm not trying to shit talk SpaceX. What I'm trying to say is that to try to claim that SpaceX did it all on their own is the same kind of stupidity as saying like Donald Trump became billionaire on his own, right? Like they had a shit ton of help and they need NASA and they need the government in order to continue to do what they like. They're
No,
not
I
going
never
back to
said
the
that they
Mars.
didn't need each other.
They're not going back to the
I'm
Mars
just
without
saying they lit a
NASA.
fire under everyone's ass.
But
including
you can
NASA.
also make the claim that the people that made decisions to fund these programs, the reason that we go and do these things, right, is one, because we're going to make money off of them, right? That's a big reason why we ever do any of the things that we do. The other thing is that we are afraid that another country is going to go do it for us and make a bunch of money off it. Those are really the only two things that we do that for. And you can look at like when the Apollo missions went away and how the space race was over. We had beaten the Russians, right? And because of that, there wasn't really any more need to go back to the moon. There wasn't any more need to push further out into space, right? We could do low Earth orbit, we could do science, we could do all these things for much less cost, much less risk. One of the big reasons why we're kind of going back to the moon and eyeballing Mars and things like that is you hear Russians and you hear Chinese talking about wanting to go to the moon, even the Indians. It's not fair to say that like SpaceX came in with their own like scientific endeavors to light a fire under the scientific community who was just asleep at the wheel. There were a bunch of like geopolitical things happening that gave rise to the American government wanting to push funding into further space exploration. Elon Musk and SpaceX were there at the right time at the right place with a lot of expertise and a lot of really great ideas and the ability to because there were other ones, the Virgin Mobile or whatever the fuck that Blue Horizon, the Bezos one and the other one, right? Like SpaceX is amazing. They're the most amazing like space private company on the face of the planet right now. Like, that's not a debatable position. But like the reason they're there isn't because they solely willed it into existence. It's because geopolitical things were happening.
I don't know.
Funding got
Kinda sounds
decided to
like
be
that's what Elon
allocated
Musk
to them to
wanted to
further the
do.
cause.
I mean,
This is
what do
my
you think
point.
Elon Musk's original reason for wanting to go to Mars is? What's your personal opinion as to why he wants to go to Mars? Or why he initially said, "Hey, I wanna go to Mars." What do
So
you
there,
think was his initial thought on that?
so I think two things about that. One, it doesn't matter if the government never gives him the money in the first place. So it doesn't matter what his idea to go to someplace was if he couldn't actually do it. So his rationale aside, the government had to give him that 80% of funding in order to
Not
get.
answering the question. Why did he originally want to go to
I said
Mars?
two parts. That was the first part. So the first part is that,
Mm.
which is one, it's fucking irrelevant. Two, it's hard to say. He has said things about saving humanity and how like we need to get off the planet to become a multi-species planet.
Only
Survivability,
from
all
day
those
one.
things. What's that?
Only from day one. That's been like his only thing.
Sure,
That's
but
been
I
like
mean,
the main thing. It's like
he says that
we want
publicly. He
to,
also talks about
conserve the light of existence.
the profitability of this, how profitable it is, and how you're going to make money for shareholders, right? So, like, there are many reasons to go to space, and he talks about all of those to different groups of people. When he makes broad public statements to try to get public sentiment behind what he's doing, he makes the broad public statements of saying it's for humanity and we're going to solve all the world's problems by becoming a multi-species planetary thing, ignoring all of the very real problems with what he's saying, right? Like, there's a book that I'm reading that I'll give you guys the name to, but it's actually these people that want to research like what it would actually take to like set up a colony on Mars, what would be the political, like the philosophical problems, the just pure scientific engineering problems, right, of doing all these things. They are tremendous. Like, and Elon Musk is the kind of person who is able to do. I'm trying to be nice here. Is able to do the things that he does in part because he willfully either ignores publicly, but like essentially will never admit that we can't do something, right? And so through that kind of like mentality of always moving forward, of always like we can do this no matter how many obstacles are in front of you, is able to do some really amazing things. But that's not to say that there aren't like a lot of realistic problems with a lot of the things that he is saying. He just doesn't ever like to address those problems publicly, other than to
Well,
say
he
they're
lets his
minor and
actions
he will
speak
deal with
for
them.
him. I wonder how many people thought it was impossible to be able to catch a booster or to be able to, land a rocket and be able to reuse the same thing. He said it's not about him even defending his own words. He's like, okay, well, just watch.
Well, again, he would. So
I
you
mean, what's the
say that.
point in talking if you're just going to do it anyways and just prove them wrong?
But he can't do it anyways unless people believe what he's saying. he got the money to do that by
Right.
convincing people he
Right.
could do it. So it's not like people
I
didn't
mean,
believe
things you're
him.
not gonna be able
Like
to
your
wish
basic
things
premise
into
here that
existence.
Elon Musk is like on an island somewhere, no one believes in what he's doing, is retarded. He's the richest man on the planet, and he has consistently got people to
He's
give
one
him
of them.
trillions of dollars to do whatever he thinks he can do. So it's just
Well,
not
look
true
at his
that no
track
one
record.
believes.
You have to
That's the
look at
thing.
his track record and
I'm not
base it
looking at
off
his
of that,
record.
right?
He is very good at what he's doing. I'm not saying he's not good at what he's doing.
And to
What
the
I'm
whole
saying,
money thing, the whole money thing, though, it's like, yes, you have to be realistic and you have to bring things to economies of scale. If it makes sense economically, then he's going to try and do it, right? So obviously, you can't build a rocket company without funds. You have to be able to convince people to feed you money so that you can go ahead and do these things. But a lot of that stuff was kind of bankrolled on his own to begin with, from the money he made from
80%
PayPal and
from your
Tesla and
own
all that stuff.
admission. It's not, you know, a lot of it based on himself. Like the original ideas and like some of the ways that he set up. But even that was like through Tesla, right? So like Tesla,
Yeah, Tesla and
the company,
PayPal, a lot of it funds that he
used like
received from that.
Elon Trump is a economist. He is a titan of economy, right? He is the richest human being to ever exist. What he did with Tesla, his ability to go in and make money is what has allowed him to take these adventures through. And I'll give it, like, if you want to believe him at his rhetoric and say that what he's trying to do is for the betterment of humanity, fine. But like you're only able to do that because of all of these other things, right? And
Well, of
there are
course. Like I
realistic
said, you can't
problems.
build a company, you can't build a spaceship to go to Mars without money.
No, yes, we're agreeing to the same thing here, right? So, but like what I'm trying to say is, like when you talk about reasons to go, you can pretend that the trillionaire who has spent his entire life making money after money after money after money doesn't think making money is a motivating force. Or you can think that some part of that equation of why he wants to do it is to continue to make more goddamn money, which is what he's always been doing. You know what I mean? So like,
So
yes,
so you don't believe that success is rewarded with money? You like
what
in
I'm
this kind of a
saying is
world,
that when
this
you
kind of a
look,
world that we live in today, if you achieve and you solve a huge fucking problem, usually that means you get a lot of money.
not at all what I'm saying. Not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is actually the opposite. That the incentive to solve problems is based on your want of money. That I know I solve a
That's
problem,
the
I get
reason why
money.
you think so. He wants to go to Mars for money. He wants
Yes,
to. He
yes,
wants to.
that's
So
why
he wants.
that's why
Yeah,
all of
yeah,
these
yeah, yeah.
corporations,
Exactly.
that's
No,
what
this is
all of
great.
these,
This is
not saying
great.
that's the only reason, but I'm saying
Yeah.
it's dumb to think that that isn't a massive reason, right? Like
Not to save
you
humanity to
just
become a
admitted,
multi-planet species, just because we want to.
you just put forward the basic capitalist principle that when you solve problems, you get money, right? Like the reward for solving a problem isn't
Yeah, but
solving
is
the
that the
problem. The
reason for
reward is
doing
getting
it?
the money
But is
because
that the
that's what.
real reason for doing it? Your
Yeah,
belief is
the
that
reward
that's his
is the
main
reason.
driver. Your
Look,
your belief is that that's his main and only driver is money, money, money. Not
so,
to solve a really big
so
problem that
then
he believed was
let's
important enough
abandon
to dedicate
capitalism.
money
Right?
and time and effort
Breaking
into.
news! Breaking news here on the You Don't Know podcast. Frank is against capitalism because he thinks that motivating factors other than money are what
Capitalism's
should
great.
motivate
I
people.
benefit off capitalism, and I think we all, in some sense, do.
Money,
I'm
personal
not against
profit,
capitalism. That's why we
personal
have such a
profit,
great country.
personal profit is the single greatest motivator of humanity. That's a fact. Again, I don't think it's the only reason he's doing it. There are many things he could be doing outside of this that would make him money, but
This might be telling about what you care about if you're thinking that everyone's only interest is money.
there are so many economists and books that you can read about like human motivation that specifically tie money to motivation because money represents an infinite possibility. So what do people, you want to get philosophical, what do people care about in their daily lives? It doesn't really matter what you care about because money allows you to get access to that in the most part. There are some extreme cases where you have people who are like extremely pious people who care nothing for money and only care about like helping other people. They are in the extreme minority in terms of population. What people care about in their day-to-day lives doesn't matter because money represents an endless possibility of whatever you want it to be. So yes, money is the single greatest motivating factor for any human being because like you just said, when you have a shit ton of money, you can then pursue your other things. So before you even get to pursue the things you care about, you have to care about getting money because money
Because
is
it's
the
an
thing,
obstacle.
right?
It's not something that
It's not an
it's
obstacle.
like
It
an
is the whole
obsession. It's something
system.
it's
It
an
is the
obstacle. In order to
entire
do the things you
system.
wanna do, you have to fix this problem, which is money.
It's it's the entire
You're
system,
saying
man.
that there's
Like,
no passion behind anything that anybody
I'm not
does. It's
saying there's
only
no
for
passion.
money.
What I'm saying is that it's dumb to ignore the influence of money on your decision-making processes. If
You
Elon
can't
Musk
ignore
woke
money.
up if
Money is a
Elon Musk
reality. You have to
woke up
solve money in
tomorrow
order to do
if
anything.
Elon Musk woke up tomorrow and realized that he was gonna go completely bankrupt in this, that the government was pulling out, Starlink stopped being profitable, and he was gonna shove every last dollar trying to chase this dream of going to Mars, or he could go do something else. He would fuck off and go do something else because,
Is that
again,
right?
like his passion to get
This
to
is
Mars
facts,
is
everybody. This is on the You Don't Know podcast here. This is
this is
absolute fact that if
out there.
Elon Musk had to put his last dollar into either SpaceX or do something
Mhm.
else in order to make
Yeah.
human life multiplanetary and to try and save the human species, he
Elon
would
Musk
rather
went
go do something
to
else.
Elon Musk went
Right.
to the government and did Doge. And Elon Musk, very, very passionate about Doge, very passionate about saving America from all of the corruption, right? What did
Mm.
he do when his Tesla stock started tanking? Did he oh fuck you, my passion tells me that I need to clean up the swamp, that I need to fix America, and I don't care about money, I care about my morals? Or did he fuck off and go back to Tesla because he needed to protect his money?
Well, what was happening to the
Like,
Tesla
this is
businesses, right?
debatable. This is not a debatable
They were
position.
being victimized of arson. They were literally lighting Teslas on fire and buildings on fire. Do you
It's
deny
just
that?
sad. It's a sad, debatable position to try to hold, man. Look, and again, I'm not trying to say that Elon Musk doesn't have passions or doesn't use his philosophy or doesn't plan these things through the lens of his moral philosophy. What I'm trying to say is that if you are going to sit there and ignore the money making aspect of what he's doing, that's dumb. It's a dumb way to think about how Elon Musk moves
Oh, I don't
and how
deny
big.
it. All I'm saying is that is not his main driver, whereas you're saying the exact opposite.
Yes, and I feel like objectively saying that, but like, like I said, all my shit talking aside, SpaceX is a phenomenal company. They've done things that no other company's done. Catching the boosters is fucking, it's wild. It's sci-fi rigmarole. Like every time I see it, it baffles your eyeballs as to how they're able to do that. Like it is absurd how well they have like mastered physics and electronics and every mechanical feat of humanity is exemplified in what SpaceX is doing. And I slightly believe in the in the same mentality I think we do as a human race have to expand. It's kind of what we always do. So like I'm not even against his basic moral argument that we have to go out there and do this, but there are real hurdles, there are real problems with even like, okay, so you get to Mars, what do you do there? Right? Like whose rules are it? Is it America? Are we claiming Mars for America? And now the president is the president of America and of Mars? Is this international waters where rules don't apply and therefore a corporation can do whatever it wants? Right? Like
Well, I think one of the
the
things that
legal
Elon
decisions are
Musk
getting very squishy when you start talking about like we're gonna build something on the moon or we're gonna build something on Mars, right?
here's the thing though. I think that Elon Musk is like his main superpower, if you will, is that he doesn't get stuck in analysis paralysis. Right? He's like, hey, there is
Mhm.
going to be challenges, there are going to be risks, but there's no point in sitting here debating it for 20, 30 years rather than just, let's try it, figure out. It's like, going up against a huge problem, would you rather have the mindset of we might fail or we're going to succeed? Like, which mindset would you choose and say, hey, this is going to be really difficult, or rather, we're going to figure it out, we're going to succeed? Which mindset would you choose going into trying to solve a huge problem?
I would
You're never going to go. You've already defeated yourself by going into it saying, "Hey, there are unsurmountable tasks. There are things we
so
just can't do."
here's the
Come on,
problem. If you're
there's
posing
two
a
ways to
question,
think
here's the
about it.
problem. But there's more than two. Like so you're again, this is the problem with the way you're phrasing a question, which is like you're saying that it's either you believe you can do anything or you believe that there are too many problems to do anything. The reality of this is that
Or
Elon
you could
Musk
wait 50 years to do anything. It's
that
like,
Elon
what do
Musk's
you do?
superpower,
Just fucking do it. That's great.
as you accurately said, Elon Musk's superpower is being able to get people to go along with him in an endeavor that seems either impossible or extremely unlikely. That is what he is extremely good at doing. Elon Musk is also has to be very good at, if not publicly stating this, then at least internally running the cost benefit analysis between what is my exposure here, what can I actually accomplish, and what can I not do, right? You
Right.
can't look at SpaceX or Tesla or any of the companies and say that what Elon did was irrationally run towards his goal, regardless of how difficult they are, right? Like he of beyond anyone is very well aware of the hard lines of what can and cannot be done. He pushes past them, but he does that in a very smart way. If he
First
didn't,
principles basis.
the whole thing would have collapsed, right? So again, your argument or your question of a mindset of we can do whatever we want, or a mindset of like we
I
can't do
didn't say
anything,
whatever
is
we
dumb.
want. I said we
You
can do and accomplish anything if we put our mind to it, basically.
well, yes, but you have to be realistic about it. So you need those people that are naysayers. You need them. You need people to tell
To a
you
degree.
this is why you can't do this, right? And then you need the people that go, I hear you, I understand those as problems, and this is how I'm going to do it anyways, right? Like you need people to poke holes in science.
Well,
Science in
well, that's
general
what engineers
is
do. That's
about
what
putting
scientists
something
do.
forward, poking
You don't
holes
need
in it, and seeing if it'll
politicians to
work.
figure out whether or not you can establish a city on Mars. You need engineers.
No, a city is very like you can build the buildings and you can build the pipes and you can build all that shit. But unfortunately, you got to put people there. And once you put people there, you need politics. You have to arrange society in a certain way, and that is not the era of an engineer. An engineer is terrible at
Well,
telling
okay,
people
well,
how to
let me
structure
ask you
their
this. Another question
lives.
is related, but not quite. If you were going to establish a political, you know, system on a new planet, would you replicate exactly what we did here on Earth?
So when we look at
Or would you
how
try something else? Because
what
clearly
is
it's
the
a little fucked here.
hold on before I ask
If
that
you
question.
haven't noticed.
Let me answer the question before I ask you another question. So when you look at human existence, right, like with the study of history, we can look at all of the things that humans have done. We can look at every form of government that has ever existed. We can look at the
Thus
benefits
far.
and then that would be the definition of history that I'm using. Yes, we can look at all of the governments that have existed. We can
Yeah,
look
to
at
put
what they've done
emphasis
good.
that it doesn't mean that we have to keep doing what we've done in the past.
No, but again, just kind of like the same thing with the scientific approach. You're being naive if you think you can reinvent a wheel without understanding all of the ways in which we've attempted to make that wheel, right? Or how we've arrived at the current wheel that we currently are using, right? And you're just like, fuck it, throw it away, let's build a new one from scratch, right? Like, well, but we have a wheel and it's working, right? So like, what are your ideas? The problem is this.
Fine
What are the
working.
basic form what are
It's
the
not
basic
working
forms of
for
government?
on a
Well,
large scale.
what are the basic forms of government? You've got monarchies, and even in a monarchy, you can encapsulate that to exist like a shit ton of other governments in terms of like dictatorships or totalitarianisms, right? Fascist governments, right, where you have essentially one person or like a concentration of power in a select few group of people.
Oligarchy.
Oligarchies. You have like that's one form of government. You have theocracies, right? Which theocracies are, by their definition, controlled by religions. You have religious people and religious clerics and religious edicts, which are governing all of the moves that the society is making. Outside of that, you've got various forms of like communism, socialism, and anarchism. So those are an attempt to wrest control away from the minority and to give it kind of carte blanche to the masses, right? That nobody can actually tell us what to do, and that we own all of the things, right? And so everybody has kind of an equal share of existence, right? And then you have democracies and all of the various versions that that encompasses as well. So with the democracy, you have things like constitutional democracies, or things like social democracies, or things like any number of the different like the communists, even like parts of what China does, right, has echoes of what democracy is because they hold votes, they have a technical party, right? Similar to like fascism, they were the Socialist Party when they came to power in Germany, right? So
And then Democratic
democracy,
Republic.
Democratic Republic, is another one of those, right? So, like when and I think when most Western historians and people that have looked at governments and looked at like the ways in which humans have organized their societies, look at all of that list and we say what works, what doesn't work, right? You need some form of a balance. That's one of the reasons why America's government is probably, at least in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinions, the best government that humanity has come up with. You have a president in charge who can make executive decisions. You have legislative bodies. You have checks and balances, and at every step of those ladders, you have the will of the people being enacted through elections, right? Which is why that is the most fair, equitable, and
If you're
and
electing on the laws directly, not on people who then have their own goddamn agendas.
what?
Well,
Say it again.
people are not perfect. That's the thing.
But they
Is
can be reelected.
it's a
I would
representative.
I would much rather vote on laws rather than an
We need-
individual. Like, why can't I vote on the law directly?
Why can't you vote? Well, okay, okay.
I see what you're saying.
So like we've shifted away from entirely the scientific, and now we're just talking about political. Okay, so let's explore that.
On another planet, though.
Yeah,
Sure.
this is
okay,
going to be the
we'll
Mars
probably
rules.
so we're doing this. Okay, so the idea
Conversation
is,
has morphed a little bit.
okay. So the idea is we are going to, instead of have any lead political, well, so even
Large
there,
classes of politicians.
but so
No
even there you
large
kind of
class
run
of
into,
politicians.
even there you kind of run into a problem. So number one, who is enacting the laws? Who is then enforcing those laws?
The
Right?
people.
No, but you have to have people that are doing those jobs, right? That are actually doing the auditing checks to make sure that these laws are being enforced, that people are
You have
following
to have
them.
enforcement. To a certain degree, you have to have enforcement. It doesn't mean you have to have politicians.
So right away, you already have a situation where you're saying that we need to have a judiciary system.
No. Policing.
Judiciary, what?
Policing.
Yeah, but beyond that, judges, constitutional people that are going to look, or law people, lawyers who are going to look at the law and interpret it, because laws are
The
only
law's
as
kind of
good.
like, oh yeah, I guess suppose maybe
Laws
lawyers.
are only as good as the language
If
in
you
which
need
they are written.
representation, I don't know.
You need
The less lawyers, the
representation.
better for the most part.
Yeah,
Guilty,
but
not
that's-
guilty. That's good.
You need representation for sure. You need legal representation.
So, look, you need lawyers, you need police, you need judges, you need some sort of a higher court system too. So you need multiple court systems, because you can't just have one court, right? If California's court says one thing and Texas's court says another thing, you have to have some sort of resolution. So you have to have a higher court. So now you've got higher courts, right? And now you have concentrations of small amounts of people whose opinion is going to dictate how that law is actually applied, right? So you can't ever fully get away from needing to rely on people's interpretations of laws, people's application of those laws, and how they think they should be applied, right?
I think that's probably when
fact-
AI should probably step in at some point. Be like,
Okay,
hey, listen,
well,
these are
but-
what the laws are,
but-
black and white.
So, but here's the problem with AI, which is that we know AI has built-in biases. We know AI is not perfect. Like, if we could get to a perfect system where AI is able to run the society with us, then fine. But we're not there. We're nowhere near there, right? So, what we need is, at your talking, you need, at the very least, you need the ability to enforce the laws that people are going to vote for in mass, right? That's the first hurdle you have. Second hurdle you have is, okay, cool. So, how do you propose these laws? Anyone? I can propose a law tomorrow. You can. Who's proposing these laws?
I think Frank is talking more about just a democracy where everybody has a vote, rather than a represented democracy like a republic. And the democracy works if you have a small enough group, but once you get a large enough group, you need representation. Yeah. It doesn't work.
And Frank also went a step further and said, we don't need politicians. All we need to do is vote on the laws. So, okay, Frank, how do you propose a law? Who proposes a law?
Some kind of an electronic device.
So anybody can do it. So any random asshole can. So we're essentially getting rid of thousands of years of experience in government building to replace it with Reddit upvoting is what you want.
Well, that's a
Right?
good question that I don't know the
Like,
answer.
anybody can put it, and like we'll just keep upvoting a thing until it becomes the most popular thing. And then we
do you think that popular vote should rule or not?
That's the thing.
If there's a law that sounds ridiculous and enough people vote on it, don't you think that that's probably what people should do?
No, absolutely not.
No?
And the reason for that is if tomorrow,
if like 99% of people think that tomorrow tolls should be illegal, do you think that that's a stupid rule? We shouldn't do that?
I think that basing that off of a popular vote alone is stupid. And the reason is if you base that off of popular opinion, you have to base everything off of popular opinion. And then tomorrow, if everyone were to wake up and say slavery should be legal, or the majority of people say slavery should be legal, you can enact slavery, right? The reason we have a constitutional democracy is that we say, yes, we can create laws and you can change things, but not these things. This core set of principles that we are all agreeing to as a nation is called the Constitution. And yes, you can change that, but changing that is very, 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 very difficult because you have to get a mass amount of support from senators and congressmen who have pledged.
No, the main reason for that is because people are reactionary and they're very short thinking as far as in the future. So if there's a massive, like something happens in the news and everybody says, oh, let's go to war, and everybody votes on that, but nobody has the forethought to think maybe this isn't good in the long run. So really the representation for people to not have everybody's vote have the same weight and not everybody can vote is because they're too short-sighted.
Well, and
that makes sense to me.
But it's not even like a mean thing to say that they're short-sighted. People don't, when you are living your life at a 9 to 5 or 10, 11-hour days, right? And you've got kids and you've got all of these problems. We're trying to run a business and you care about the football games. You care about these things. You are not in a position to pay attention to the very subtle nuances of every law that comes across the table, right? Even so, like the idea of a toll, right? We tomorrow say, hey, should we have tolls? Yes or no, right? People are like, I don't like paying tolls. No, right? Oh shit, where did all the funding go for the SNAP programs? Oh shit, where did all the funding go for building a bridge? Oh shit, where did all the funding go for, right? Like people don't generally understand how interconnected all of this is, right? And so if you just like go
that is just if that information is not just like withheld, right? Like we need to have reasons why things don't go our way or do go our way in terms of when we vote for things, right? So let's say a law is proposed, like you say, and this is going to have detrimental effects down the line. A law is proposed, and then you release information as, hey, this is what happens if this law is enacted. Do you still want to vote on this type of deal, right?
So that's a thing that happens today. If you've ever looked at like a voting pamphlet, the law that is being, because you can vote on laws. We all vote on laws in your local elections. You vote on laws because generally most laws are controlled at the state level. They're not actually, or city level. They're not actually, especially tolls, like things that would affect your day-to-day life aren't being stated by the federal government. They're being stated by your local city government, municipalities, cities, and then states, right? Those are the laws that most affect you. And you do vote on those. If they're trying to pass a new tax levy that says, hey, we want to increase property tax by 2%. And in doing that, right, we're going to take that money, we're going to put it towards libraries, right? They state that, and then in the voter pamphlet, there will be a pro and a con. They will have somebody who's saying, this is why we should do this and give reasons, and then a con that says, this is why we shouldn't do this and give reasons. The problem that you run into, right, with the system that you're talking about is what happens if people lie? Or what happens if people stretch the truth? What happens if somebody's very good at orating, very good at getting people on their side, and they have a personal interest in getting rid of tolls because they spend a lot of money on tolls? And getting rid of tolls will help me. And I don't really give a shit about libraries. I don't really give a shit about public. I don't care about all the other effects that it's going to have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to support the rule to get tolls. I am going to downplay or try to pretend that the knock-on effects either aren't real or are very minimal, and that you should support these tolls. I'm going to frame it in a way that kind of tries to convince you to come to my side, right? We're talking about politics, like the art of getting
about
people
human beings. being human
No, but
beings.
so my point here is politics is human nature. If you tomorrow, Frank, in your system are going to support you and say, I want a bill that does this, that's not enough. You then have to go out and you have to get people on your side to vote for that bill. That is politics. That is the whole system of politics, is convincing enough people to vote for you, or convincing enough people that they shouldn't vote, right? Which is another side of politics. It doesn't often get talked about, but there are a ton of efforts that get put into people sending ad campaigns and trying to essentially get people turned off of voting. Because if you can minimize the full amount of people voting, you can maximize your control of certain demographics, right? Which is, you're talking about politics, right? So
Well,
no matter what you do, if you have a system in which you are suggesting a law and then people are voting on it, you have to have groups that are either interested in or against it, who are going to be competing against each other and using politics to try to get their own end.
well, Frank's what you're saying is no matter what, it's going to be corrupt because people are corrupt. That is why we have a balance of powers. So that's because people are flawed, and the founding fathers knew that. That's why we have a separation of power and checks and balances. So theoretically, it limits that, or at least, minimizes it as much as possible, because you have other people saying, hey, I see what you're doing there, and that's not how we should be going about it, so that you can challenge and not just anybody can propose a law and then it gets passed.
Mhm. Yep. And it's, again, human beings being corrupt, human beings, David Hume, Adam Smith talk about this, right? Like the thing that makes us really good, right? The reason why we even engage in society at all, like why do any of us agree to be beholden to a government, right? It's an interesting question.
To protect the natural rights of the people.
That's correct. But so what in that? Why do we care about protecting the rights of the native? Right? Like, what is that to you? Like, why do you care about that? Right? When you start digging down on these things, what you find, and what like David Hume and Adam Smith, some of these people will talk about, is like, if you go back pre kind of government, right, to even like pre tribalism, right, where you just had people existing in what they would call like their vulgar state, right? Like they are just trying to survive. You're trying to get meat. You're trying to, do whatever you're trying to do to survive. It is very difficult. This is a very difficult thing to do. The beginnings of government are when and people realized that by banding together, we can together control more resources, and that makes my life easier. I then don't have to worry as much about where am I going to get my meat, where am I going to get my food, how am I going to protect my people, right? I got a friend who's going to help me out with that, right? And as that begins to grow, you see people, more rules start coming in. It's like, okay, well, now we're in a group together, but how come I can't just take some of your stuff? Or what if I want the things you have? Why can't I just take that, right? And so when you set up government, the first laws that get enacted are in the appropriation of property, how to transfer that property legally, and then consequences for if somebody breaks those tenets, right? You have to structure society in such a way that it is beneficial for those living inside of it, and therefore they want to continue to engage in that society. That's how you build governments over time. So the core function of like, why do we want to do this, and this kind of goes back to like why capitalism works really fucking well, is that we want to do this because we're selfish. Like, I would do this because it gives me more chances to be better. It gives me more chances to do things I want to do than if I was on my own living in the goddamn woods. And that basic core principle is what spirals out into the larger forms of various governments and all the rules and regulations and controls and things like that. Then you add mixtures of like morality and theocracy and gods inside of there. But like the basic concepts are, government has to provide a standard of living to its population that is agreeable to the continued improvement of those people, if that makes sense. And so like, yes, all of that is true. And it brings up an interesting thing where like all of our charity, all of the things where like we care about building a better society, people want to it as just pure like niceness coming out of the goodness of the soul. but you can look at it through a different lens, which is that the better our society is, the better chance we have at increasing our own personal wealth or influence, right? And so we want society to work functionally well. We have a vested interest as an individual with individual wants and needs in getting society to a better state of existence, right? And that's why, to answer your first question, would we use the same government form? I think you have to do a constitutional republic democracy on some level. Now, exactly what that constitution is, exactly what the rules are you're going to start with, like I would, those are all maybe debatable, things we can talk about, but the basic function, the basic controls, I think do have to be very, very, very much rooted in that constitutional republic democracy.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing you'd have to agree upon is what do we agree are the natural rights of people that need to be protected?
Mhm.
And that's your jumping off point.
Yep. And who does it apply to everyone? Does it, and then we get right into like you start immediately devolving into the questions, because like, okay, what are the natural rights of everyone? Does that apply to everyone standing on our soil? Does that, so if somebody comes here, do we not have to give them rights? Right? Like, this is the
Right.
exact same question we're having right now, right? In
Yeah.
the debate. So like you have to work all of these things out. And so like when people talk about like, well, we'll just create a new government, similar to like the anarchists, it's like the anarchists will be like, look, we'll just get rid of all of government and everything will be fine. It's like, okay, well, here's a question for you. What happens if somebody does something wrong? It's like, well, we would all get together and talk about it, and then we would decide on a punishment. It's like, okay, so a court, you jackass, you're talking about
Yeah.
the court.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really
Okay,
tough
well,
to
what do you
get
do?
away from what we had. Like, yeah.
What do you do if you
Because
have
what's
bread and
funny
you
is
walk
because
a bike?
that's how it started. Is it started like super small, like really just people getting together, having that conversation, and then it has grown into what it is today. But then you try to do it. You're like, okay, how would I do it differently? And then you end up coming to the same conclusions that
Same place.
they've come up with. It's really interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and like, so there's an argument. So here, let me now that we've kind of stated this, there is a argument that I've not heard Elon Musk make, but that I could see people in that class making, which is that you create a techno, what is it called? It's a techno
Technocracy.
technocracy, which is you are you are having some form of a constitution, right? And the constitution exists, kind of declaring that there are certain basic human rights. And but beyond that, we get rid of essentially like the senators and the congressmen, and you only, in terms of like commerce and things like that, you only have businesses in charge of that. You don't have people voting, you have businesses voting based on shareholders and based on what's good for business in general, and that those people are making the decisions on that front. You have a constitution that essentially controls the morality of people in a vague sense, and the like day to day, like even like the killing, or like even theft and things, like you could maybe push that underneath the business controlled side of things, like theft being something that could be considered, especially theft against business, right? You could have different jurisdictions that would apply to different things. So, like, if the crime is committed against a business, the business side of the government takes over essentially, and if it's a personal side, then it's the personal side of government, right? It's an ability to try to separate out the two things.
Hmm.
To me, that creates way too many problems, right? And you're what we've seen when you don't, when you allow businesses to not have any checks and balances other than themselves, you end up with like the 1910s, right? You If the constitution proposed underneath the like businesses can control themselves thing was strong enough, and if enforcement mechanisms were strong enough to hold businesses to account, to say like, you can't abuse your workers, you can't pay them a less than the livable wage, you can't work them more than 12 hours overtime, you can't do this, you can't pollute, you have to do these certain things, you can't destroy the local ecosystems, and then there was something to hold them to effect to that, then sure, right? Like, we could do that, but you're getting dangerously close to, like, again, recreating democracy, which is that businesses largely do kind of govern themselves, and then we have laws that govern the businesses in the way that they behave. So, like, even with like a techno whatever it is, like, it's very difficult to see an actual path that doesn't just circle back around to like dictatorship by another name, where rather than an individual or like a family, you just now Boeing or, Tesla or, Amazon as your dictator who can do whatever they want. And there really isn't anyone can do to say or, about it. So
Hmm.
it's very tough to try to think of a new government form that would work better outside of like some sci-fi rigmarole where like, yeah, we have perfect AI that can just do all of this without us having to even think about it, which is just
Do
not
you
what
guys remember Starship Troopers?
Mhm.
Right?
The
Their
only
voting system was based on whether or not you were an
citizens,
actual citizen, right?
yeah,
So,
it was
and
military.
you're not born a citizen, you're born a civilian, and then you have to
Yeah,
either do military service, some kind of a service,
yeah.
and then you earn your citizenship, and then you can then
Hmm.
vote,
So
which is
there
kind
are
of interesting.
many
It is
there are
interesting.
many there are many governments around the world that require military service as a part of. Or so, like, if you look at Israel, right? Israel's a good example. Israel is largely a democracy, right? Granted, they don't really allow certain people to vote inside of their democracy at certain levels, but they are a democracy, and they vote in their parliaments and their prime ministers and their presidents and all that sort of thing. Very similar to how we. But they do require military service, and I think there might be an option for like you can either go into the military or you do like a religious service or there's some sort of other thing, but essentially you have to do some form of like community service. You Once you get to a certain age, it is required of you to engage in civil society in some level, whether that is military or you're going to go join Doctors Without Borders or you're going to, work at food banks or, whatever it is, you have to be a part of our society on some level. Right. And I think that's a good idea. I really do. Like you should, I think there should be an expectation that we all do that. I think it's good for young people to give them something, some vision of like what the world is, some idea of what our country is and what the different people are, an idea of like how your how your impact can be felt in various areas, right? Some responsibility to the system as a whole that isn't just built in like mean culture fucking nonsense, right? Like make them leave their rooms and come out into the real world and be a part of it. Like I think that's a valid approach to it.
Would you support increasing the voting age to like 21?
No,
Hmm.
no, I think the problem there,
Have you had a
I would
conversation
maybe
with like an 18-year-old lately?
here's the thing.
Yeah.
I
Sometimes
would
I feel like they
maybe
just don't get it,
here's the thing.
I don't think they're
For
there
sure,
yet,
I
but it
would
depends.
I would first off, it depends. And second off, I've talked to some 40-year-olds where it's like, how have you even survived this long? Like, so it's like, it's not like age is necessarily a determining factor, but like,
Sometimes you wonder how
the,
Darwinism hasn't taken people out.
well, hey, look, our society we've built is very kind and has been supporting of many people that would have otherwise died. But so like the thing with that is like I would maybe support moving the voting age to 21 if you were also okay with moving the enlistment age for military to 21. I don't see any world in which you can go get shot overseas and can't vote in a system like that. Feels fucked to
Yeah.
me on too many levels.
Agreed.
So like if you were willing to entertain like not, and there's no way in hell the military is going to not recruit 18-year-olds because like I talked to my Marine friend and we were kind of dancing around the subject, and it's like
That's a
you
good point.
like the bread and butter of the military is 18 to like 21, right? Like if you're going to say you can't even enlist until you get past 21, most people have kind of wised up by then. They're like, fuck that shit. I want nothing to do with it. Like they need that block of 18 to 21-year-olds to really fuel the military machine as it is. So like they're never going to go for that. And so
No.
like I feel like the but to your point, we need a better educated electorate, a better educated population on how government works in the first place. Because when you talk to people, most of them don't understand civics. They don't understand how the government works. They don't understand checks and balances. They don't understand the Constitution. You even go to these places and you get people with like fucking American flags all over them, like being like Constitution, and then you start talking to them about it, and they have no idea what any of this shit is. And it's wild, right? Like we need better civics. We need better understanding. It's like, how do you do that? How do you engage people into civics in a way that centers it for them? Right. And one of the ways is kind of what you propose, Frank, which is like you make it mandatory. Like you have to be engaged in some way or form in the government throughout for these particular years, through ages 18 to ages 20, 2 years of service,
Yeah, put some skin in
military.
the game. In other words,
Greenpeace, go be a government, go into the government, go run for office, right? Go be an aide to a senator, right? Like you could, like, if you don't want to do the military, fine. Like you shouldn't, everyone shouldn't be forced into military because like some people have moral objections to that. But like you should do some form of civil service that would enlighten you to the greater society that we're living in. I think that is a very good thing, but
it would probably
hard to do.
reduce that because I think it's easy for people to have the position of like, oh, it's me against the government or it's the people against the government. They're just trying to bring us down. And it's like, well, if you were a part of it and could
Yeah.
actually see that how it works and see how it can be conducive to not only your life but to just society as a whole, then
Yep.
it's like, okay, maybe I have a voice and some skin in the game, like Frank said, and two, it's not just like this adversary that's like Uncle Sam's just trying to bring me down and somebody
Yep.
I have to fight.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a similar critique with some of the like. I'm not saying that you can't critique police if you've ever been a police officer, but what I am saying is like if you believe that policing in general is 100% like defunct and that there are all these problems that are hard baked into the system, like yes, you can point that out, and yes, we can do things to try to change laws, and you should do all those things. But if all you're doing is pointing out those things, like, why don't you go become a better cop? You know what I mean? Like, if you like, go improve the system that you're shitting all over. If you think that that can be done, because like, if you are identifying this as the problem that you think is the most impactful in the world, go become a cop. Like, no one's stopping you, right? Go join, go be a better cop. Go improve that system, right? And people are very loath to do that because it's very easy to point out a flaw in the government or in a system. It is much, 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 much more difficult to be like, what do you do about that, right? And that's why, like, when you look at like fictional movies, right? Like when you look at Star Wars, or for example, like Empire evil. Yes, very true, very, very true. So what do? We overthrow it. Cool, let's do that. Okay, we do it. Now what? Fuck. Like, like people that like now, okay, now you're in charge. Now you got to make these calls, right? And like, how are we going to make sure that we're not making bad calls? How are we going to make sure that everything is fair, right? And so like, that was not to go too far down the Star Wars rabbit hole, but that's why Andor was really particularly good, was because it was like after the fall of the Empire, and sorry, not after the fall of the Empire. It was during the revolution for the fall of the Empire, and they're actively trying to do it. But you're also seeing these conversations about like, what do we do, and like, and what are we willing to do that's evil in order to get the overthrow of the more evil thing, right? And like,
Yeah.
at what point, like, your ends justifying your means, like you are committing such horrible acts that by the time you overthrow the evil thing, you're just the evil thing. Like, you've just become the evil thing. Like, yes, you got rid of the thing, but like what you had to do to get there was horrible. And now you are
Yeah.
corrupted with everything else that exists. You know what I mean? And it's
Which
an
is like
interesting.
that's like the common theme in most or any revolution, right?
Yep. Yep. And like I said, it's easy to, people work on their passions. People make decisions based on how they feel, not what is logical. And so when you need people to move because you are logically working out that I don't like this system, I want a better system, you need to engage people not logically but passionately. So you need to rouse them through saying hyperbolic language, through using fear baiting terms, right? And trying to get them to become so impassioned and afraid and enraged that they're willing to go out of their daily lives to support us, whether it's in a vote or money or whatever it might be. Like, and that's a huge problem. I think engaging in civility is one part of it. The other part of it is somehow enlightening people to the way that they are moved not by their logic, but by their passion. Because so many people, even very logical people, I don't think fully understand how emotional we are and how much more important it is to make an emotional argument rather than a rational argument, especially when you're talking to masses. And how that affects people and how we need to control it, understand it. I don't know what to do about it, but like it is the Achilles heel of the human race that you can always get a demagogue, somebody who talks really well and scares the shit out of people into doing horrific things. And we've seen that throughout history. If there's somebody that can come up and play to the baser instincts of humanity, they can whip them into doing whatever they want, and that is a problem. But I don't one without a solution, as far as I'm aware of, other than Constitution and checks and balances being like literally the only thing that has ever even remotely stopped that instinct is that, right? Like other than that, like it's just a runaway fucking train at that point. Everything gets thrown out the window. You know.
And even with that, you still see it happen on a micro scale in whatever way people can do it.
Yep. So, yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like when Elon Musk, to circle all the way back to the beginning, when Elon Musk talks about like, okay, let's go to Mars, and because of his mindset that like you talked about, Frank, which again is a very conducive mindset for getting shit done and doing things that we've never done before. I don't think that's lost on him because he's too smart for it to be lost on him, except for maybe in his like Asperger's, like, non-under. It's also kind of funny that's like, let's send to Mars to set up the new political government the guy that doesn't understand how people act. Like, human nature baffling. Like, let's let him decide how we're going to organize society, right?
Maybe that's the logic level, that we need that you were talking about.
Maybe, maybe, but like I think he is smart enough to not have those things lost. I mean, he's read enough, he knows enough to know that those are hugely problematic things, right? But problematic things that he doesn't necessarily have to care about right now because he cares about getting the rocket to Mars, right? One step in front of the other, right? Like, let's get this solved before we get that solved. And his faith in ability to solve problems is what keeps him marching forward, because like when we get to that wall, we will go around it, blow it up, dig underneath it, go jump over it, right? We will do something to continue to move in the way that we want to move, which again is like that's a solid mindset. You got to do it, but like the people that I think downplay that instinct in him or that necessity in human nature for like moving us forward, I think are on a wrong track. Like we have to be very well aware of these problems. And sometimes you do run up against something that you can't get around, and you're just like, you either have to stop dead or you have to accept that this is status quo, at least for now. You know what I mean? So
yeah, that's true. Eventually we'll get to a point where we're either psychologically or technologically not advanced enough to solve a particular problem, but it doesn't mean that we can't venture into other things.
No, for sure. And like who knows, like I a big critique I have of Democrats, but of politics in general, is that we are, and when I was watching Artemis, the mission, right, I was being inspired to this, which is like, again, we are base creatures. We react based off our emotions. Fear and like blame and hatred are the easiest, quickest ways to get us to move. But hope and inspiration and pride in where we're going and what we can do and what we want to do, like an imagination, like getting us thinking more about where we're going than where we've been, our politics is lacking. And we need that. We need as a country to not be stuck in looking backwards, but going, fuck that, we are going to go forward. Which as much as I shitted on Elon Musk for, like, we need a little bit more of that mentality to push us forward. Of like, no, we are not going to stay here shooting ourselves in the foot again and again and again with the same other bullshit and blaming each other over it. We need to solve these problems, right? There shouldn't be hungry people in America. We should be able to explore outwards into the universe. We should be able to adapt AI to improve our lives, right? We need to talk about those things and get them in the forefront. These are scientific, amazing things that we can do, and that we should be celebrating ourselves as we accomplish them on a mass scale and minimizing the noise to the other bullshit that is nonsensical. But again, that's easier said than done.
True, but what does that have to do with the Democrats, though? Because I feel like there's
Oh,
examples
yeah,
on
sorry, I
both
didn't
sides
really
of
connect
that.
that very well. My problem with the Democrats is just that they don't have any vision for the future, and that, like, the Republicans as well don't, but they're in a weird circuitous way. Like, Republicans have a better vision for the future, which is, let's just go back, and that's a better vision. Like, the future is to go back, right, and make America great again, right? Like, let me play on your nostalgia and your belief that there was once a better time, and that time, whatever you think that is, that big term will be the where we're going, right? Is and So, like in a weird, skewed way, Republicans have a vision for the future. It's just a regressive one. Democrats just bitch mostly about like what the problems are, and they don't really like any of the Democrats that do have a vision that talk about any kind of like let's talk big scale about socialism or like how we're going to get solve problems on a macro scale. The Democratic Party eats them alive and hates them and doesn't want them anywhere near the front because they're terrified of them, right? So, like the visionaries of the Democratic Party don't get listened to by the Democratic Party, and then they end up with either status quo politicians like Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden and Barack Obama, of like what we're offering you is consistency, normality, and like lukewarm water with toast that isn't toasted all the way. Like it's just like bland nothingness is what they're trying to offer. This kind of like technocratic, like we don't need a vision for anything in the future kind of a politic, which just doesn't motivate people. And you see that through the polls of the Democrats who just continue to get like it's wild that Donald Trump and the Republicans their approval ratings are fucking horrific. And consistently, either the only other thing that is as horrible or sometimes even more horrible is the fucking Democratic Party. And it's like, how do you have the villain of all villains sitting in the White House and you can't run against it? Like you can't mount any kind of a convincing alternative to where we're gonna go and what we're gonna do. Like it's just fucking pathetic. And so, like, yeah, the Democrats, like, that's their problem is that they don't have a vision for where we want to go, and like they need it for sure.
Well, I think they also have like an identity crisis
Mhm.
within the Democratic Party. It's like, we kind of got Donald Trump because the United States got 4 years of Biden, where it was you don't really know who was at the helm, right? At this case with Trump, you know who's calling the shots. You don't think that there's somebody puppeteering back there when Donald Trump's in the room, basically. So the
Mm, I
majority
know,
of the United States voted for somebody who's a decision maker, and that's kind of what they got, right?
sure.
But they also knew that he was a little
That
bit of a wild cannon.
Yeah, I mean, when you peel back that onion a little bit, I think there's a lot of question of like Donald Trump listens to the last person he heard speak, and Donald Trump, like there are some people that are adept at maneuvering Donald Trump, right? So like who's actually at the helm is like maybe a little bit more specific. But point taken with the Biden thing. I think that the bigger problem is that like when you look at the Democratic Party versus the Republican Party, the Democratic Party is a coalition of uh, different sexual orientations, gay people, lesbians, transgendered people, different races, different religions, different economic classes, military. Like it runs the spectrum of
Well, so is the
American
Republican
society
Party. We just don't fixate on
to
that.
a much lesser extent. To a much lesser extent, when you look at the makeup of the two, the Republican Party in the majority is white and is Christian, and that is their identity. And all the other groups that kind of go along with them like the position that the white Christian Americans are putting forward as the vision for what America is. The Democratic Party is a pluralistic party. It has so many different groups that don't agree with one another that like you end up like it's very hard to get everyone marching in the same direction, right? And that's a huge problem for the Democrats. Is like they don't they get kind of like what you said, Frank. They get the paralysis of action. Like they fear to make a choice because it might piss off one of their factions, right? And so they end up doing nothing, and that becomes a huge problem. It's like you have to make moves, and you can't make everybody happy. And Democrats largely try to make everyone happy and
Well,
just
they
piss
try to
everyone
make
off.
a very small proportion of the population happy over the
No,
overwhelming majority.
that's not true.
So,
I
are
get
you sure?
frustrated at this because yeah, I can make the argument. I get frustrated at this because I've heard this argument for a very long time. And the small percentage of the population that you think that they're placating, right? Just to confirm, so I'm not putting words in your mouth, is like the hard left, right? Is like the socialists, the anarchists, the communists, right? Those are the people that the Democratic Party placates in favor of the rest of the world. That's what your claim
For the
is,
most
right?
part.
Okay. It's not true. And so the reason I know that shit's not true,
Well, that
look at
case
who the
solved.
politician, huh?
Case
What?
solved. Nothing.
So here's the reason why I know that's not true. I in many cases am much more to the left. I'm like a progressive person in general. I tend to be more on the socialist side of things. I like capitalism needs to be a thing, and we need to incentivize growth, and you can't completely socialize business, right? And so, like, a true socialist system is not something that I'm advocating for. But like, we are a socialist country in some regards, and we need to improve certain socialist tendencies of our government. And so, like, on the scale of Democrats, I lean to the progressive and to the more like socialist oriented side of things. And we are hated by mainstream Democrats. Mainstream Democrats, who are the majority of the power holders in the Democratic Party, hate that because they are their entire identity is around maintaining the status as it is. The companies, the big business, kind of the way American society is, the way that like wars work, right? All of that, they want to leave it the same way it is. And if anything, make very tiny incremental changes here and there that over like a long period of time might add up to something. But in the short to medium term, just amount to like status quo, right? And so you see consistently politicians like you can even say AOC and Bernie Sanders and like any number of actual progressive Democratic candidates. Mondami is one of them who get crucified by the Democratic Party and by news media. And they're called radicals and they're called terrorists. And we can't let these people represent us as a democracy. Go watch MSNBC. They will shit all over these people nonstop from the beginning cycle to the end cycle, as much, if not more, than the Republicans shit on them, right? The reason Republicans like to say that the Democrats support them is because the Republican base hates them. And so it's in their interest to paint the Democratic Party with the same brush they're painting AOC or Bernie Sanders, ignoring the reality that the Democratic Party fucking hates Bernie Sanders and AOC and wishes they weren't around because they don't want to have to cover that side of their thing. So like, it's not true that the Democratic Party supports the hard left. It just isn't. The hard left has been clawing their way into the Democratic Party over dead bodies for decades now. That's what's been happening. And if you know anything about the Democratic Party, you've watched them throughout the 2-3 decades. That's what it is, and that's what's been happening.
It just seems to me like they're always on the wrong side of an 80-20 argument, right? With representation for certain sexual demographics, where you have situations where they allow men into women's areas or they allow men into women's sports and things of that nature.
So,
they're always on the wrong side of where the overwhelming majority of Americans feel is right.
So that's okay. So we can talk about that point. You offered up one issue, right, which is the transgender issue in particular, right? So, but that's one issue out of a ton of issues. The Democrat, and you can look at the way the mainstream Democrats have reacted to this, which is to largely abandon transgender people. If you look at mainstream Democrats, not progressives, they are not championing them as hard as they were because they read the polls and they realized that the Republicans were beating them on this issue, and they abandoned their moral stance in favor of the popular sentiment.
I don't believe it was ever a moral stance to begin with.
It was a moral stance to begin with, and we can argue that point. But the Republicans messaged on that issue way better than everyone else, and they were able to whip up popular sentiment against it. And the Democrats, doing what Democrats do, abandon their position in favor of other topics to fight on and to continue down the road. So progressives still very much support transgender rights in a lot of areas. If you want to talk about the morality of all of this, or like and this is so like earlier on through our conversation, I was talking about the way you're phrasing the question, Frank. The way you phrase questions about the transgender issue changes the polling, right? And so like when you talk about certain things in certain ways, people have certain views of it. Same thing with like the Iran war. If you say, do you support Donald Trump in the Iran war? Yes. If you say, do you support Iran in do you support Donald Trump in the Iran war? if we have to put boots on the ground, it drops off the face of the map. Like nobody supports this, right? Even on the Republican side. Like how you're talking about issues affects polling and affects like who has the popular support. So for the issue of transgender, if we want to switch, I know we talked about this a long time ago. We can go back to it. No one wants to have a nuanced conversation about this, right? On the one side, you have, well, even before I go down that path, I think it's important when we talk about transgender to frame this correctly. Can you look up how many transgender people exist in our country right now, Mr. Frank?
Percentage wise or numbers wise?
Percentage is fine. I mean, you do both percentage and numbers of transgender people in this country right now. Because this is, I think, an interesting way to start this. Survey says ChatGPT. So slow your
In
internet,
adults,
Frank. Jesus.
it's 0.8%.
0.8%. Okay.
In youth, which is 13 to 17, 3.3%.
3.3%. Okay. So even if we were to say that like 3.3 was the more realistic across the full population, right? So like when you say adults versus what was the age group? You said the
So
younger age
adults
group?
with 18 and over, obviously 0.8%, and in youth 13 to 17 is
13, 7. So how many
3.3.
years of age? So 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So 5 years. So type in your little chat GPT. How many people in America are between the age of 13 and 17?
Your little chat GPT, Frank.
Your little chat GPT.
My
Frank.
little chat GPT here. 21
Your
to
little
22 million.
How many?
21 to 22 million.
Okay, so now type in what, or do the math yourself if you're gangster. What is 3.3% of what's the highest number on that? 22 million? What's 3% of 22 million or whatever it is?
693,000.
693,000.
3.3%.
So what percent of the population is 693,000?
Wait, hold on. That might be off actually.
Hey, look at him getting his math wrong.
I know. 693,000. 693,000.
693,000. Okay. So what percentage of the American population is 693,000? And even this is debatable because are we including like actual undocumented people in this, or we're just going census, right? So, but let's just leave it to whatever the number is.
Point 0.21%.
So what's 0.21% and 0.8? So we're like 1%, 0.2 and 0.8,
Yeah,
right? Because
1%.
the adults were what? So 1% of the what's that?
Yeah, it was 0.8% for the adults.
0.8 for the adults, and we're saying 0.2 for the kids, right? So when you add those percentages together, you get 1%.
Yeah, 1%.
So 1% of the entire country of America identify as transgender, right? That is a tiny, tiny population. That is, if I'm not mistaken, probably the single smallest minority in the entirety of America. And you can check that to see if that's the case, but I would almost guarantee it's the case. There are more gay people, there are more lesbian people, they're more black, they're more every race, they're more every religion, except for maybe Satanists or something really fucking weird and small, right? So Frank is going to double check me here, but the transgender issue has been exploded into the largest single thing in this country when mathematically it represents one of the tiniest inconsequential. And then when you start looking at where the concentrations of transgender people are for large swaths of the country, there's none. There's zero. Like the number of transgender people that are there is infinitesimally small, right? And so we're talking about an issue that almost no one has exposure to, right? Like no one knows trans people. No one generally sees trans people. They're not in your communities generally, unless you're in Seattle or San Francisco or somewhere where these people are at, right? And you don't have any exposure to them or who they are or what they are. So anytime you have a minority or any group that is undefined in public sentiment, it is very easy to demonize them. And again, you can look throughout history at all the times we've demonized populations that are misunderstood. You can look at Black people, Mexicans, Asians. Just in this country alone, you can look at the way Genghis Khan was depicted to the Chinese, right? You can look at any time you have an other and how easy it is to paint them however you want to paint them because no one knows who the hell they are and they've never seen these people, right? Especially if they're very different from you. So the idea of transgender people being extremely different makes them very easy to be very scary to people, right? And so to start off the conversation, we have to acknowledge these facts before we even begin talking about transgender issues. Second, nobody really wants to have a nuanced conversation on this, right? They just want it to be very simple. Trans people either have every single right and should be allowed every single thing, or they should be allowed absolutely nothing and their abominations should be wiped off the face of the planet. That's a dumb
I
argument.
believe that's true. I mean, you can you can find a happy medium if public opinion, says so.
But and this is just what Adam was talking about, and this is just what we were talking about. If public opinion says that we should enslave all the Black people tomorrow, we still shouldn't do that, right? Like we can objectively say that there are certain things, even if you whip up enough public fear and frenzy about, that we shouldn't agree to that because it is morally bankrupt to do so, right? So when you look at the transgender issue, we have to look at it through like a civil rights issue, we have to look at it through a human rights issue, and we have to look at it through like a societal issue, right? So to get very basic about it, like again, cost benefit analysis is like what is the harm here that we are thinking that these people pose, and what is the solutions that you think you're proposing to stopping that harm from existing, right? So if you look at, and I'll put a few forward, if you want to put more forward, feel free to, Frank, but like some of the bills, right, that have been out there, right, to protect people against the scourge that is transgender people are like, one, no transgender people in female sports, right? That's one. That's a big one that they've advocated for. Another one is like no transgendered women.
They added it to the Olympics too, I think. After that poor woman got beat nearly to death by that boxer.
Yeah, there was but there was also a woman who they excluded because she had too high testosterone, even though she was a naturally born woman. So these issues get complicated when you start looking into it. And I say Adam, you can look it up. Yeah, so because there is a testosterone level essentially that dictates the measurements, right? I don't know if they ended up giving her back her medal, but she was like an African lady. This happened years ago, and they tested her, and she tested too high for like I think testosterone, and so they like weren't allowed.
Did they assume that she was taking testosterone,
was she like doping or doing something?
No,
is that the reason why?
Natural testosterone that she was born that way, and she just has naturally high testosterone. But the thing is, like, because the thing, if I'm remembering this was years ago, they use a band to say like if you're high, like in order to classify for women's sports, you have to be within a band of testosterone, and if you're above
how
that,
long is this recent because of the transgender thing, or is this?
It was wrapped up in the transgender thing, but it was years ago. I can't remember. I can try to find it for you guys. But
wow. So even if you're born a biological female and you have too high of testosterone, they will not allow you to participate in the Olympics.
It becomes the question too, though, right? Which is like, so what are we calling a woman, right? If you're talking about just testosterone, what happens if you're just biologically born with a shit ton of testosterone? You're a woman. Is that fair to let them compete?
Right? Like, let them compete.
What are we calling this? And so like, whenever you try to nail down on trans issues, it starts getting real fucking squishy. So that's one of them, right? Trans issues were that. I'm happy to talk about that because I have a position on this and I think it's a nuanced conversation and it's worth having. The other one is the bathroom issue, right? Not allowing, like, you have to use your assigned at birth gender inside a bathroom, which is the other one, right? And I would say there's like a third one that goes into, I've heard Jessica make this argument because she's very anti-trans, is no biologically male people in female prison. So like if you're arrested for a crime,
obviously, right? It's like how are women coming out of all female prisons and they're coming out pregnant?
Well, I mean, in large part because
Besides
of the
the
guards,
guards and
but
all that
also
shit,
because of
yeah.
other things.
Usually
Like, I, like,
they have female guards guarding the female, uh,
they don't always have
prisoners,
female guards guarding female prisoners. That's
but they should,
factually
even if they
incorrect.
didn't.
That's
Sure,
factually incorrect. I'm
I'll agree to
positive.
that, sure, but they
Look it
should.
up. You got your little
Just
chat
like
GPT. You
there
can look
shouldn't
it
be
right now.
female cops guarding male inmates. That's
There
ridiculous.
are, in fact, female cops guarding male inmates.
I'm not saying that
constantly.
there aren't. I'm saying that there shouldn't be.
Well, but you were okay. But so number one, we don't have enough females to do that, right? And we don't have enough like you. That's a whole separate issue that I'm not going to go down that
Yeah.
kind of road right now. My point is like if we look at the transgendered laws that they were passing, right? There are those. Then there are like some ID laws too. That are like you have to display your at birth ID, your at birth sex or ID, and you can't claim that you're a man if you're not a woman, right? Those are. Do you know of any other laws? Those are the main laws that I've seen.
Well, just female spaces in general, like locker rooms, right?
I'm kind of incorporating bathrooms into all of that, but yeah, sure. Like females,
Those
whatever
are the
you want
main.
to, whatever weirdness you want to define that as, right? Okay, let's define that as that. So let's take them one by one. And this is the problem when you talk about trans issues, is like you have to go down this level of nuance to have a decent conversation about it. No one really wants to do. So let's talk about women's sports. I think this one actually has an area that should be, in my understanding of it, like probably the most agreed upon area that exists, right? So when we look at sports, I think it's easy to classify them into two separate areas where we really have to look at them. Maybe three. One, which is like early sports. So like the sports that exist throughout like high school, right? Up into college, scholarships being a specific thing, right? I think is worthy of having a separate conversation about. And then you've got professional sports as a third thing. So even when you're talking about like transgender people in sports, those are three different conversations that you have to take kind of in tow. So when you look at like child sports, right? So you look at that bracket, right, of like high school back through elementary of sports. You Frank played more sports than I did. I know Adam, you played a ton of sports as well. I played a little bit of sports, right? What would you guys say is the value of sports? Like what do kids get out of engaging in sports? What is the reason we think that it's good for them? What is the reason we think that they should play, especially team sports, but all sports?
Well, obviously
Discipline,
operating within
working
a
as a team.
doing your assigned duty, right? Competing, losing, learning to lose, overcome adversity, things of that nature.
Yep. And I would even say, like, we've been on teams, right, where like you're on one team and the other team comes in, and you, especially at that age, and the other team looks like they're about 4 years older than you, and they come from like a lot of money, where they got a lot of good equipment, and they've clearly hired good coaches, right? And you're about to get fucking rolled because those people have all the built-in advantages over to you, right? Like that's a realistic thing that happens in sports, right?
Sure.
I'm not unfair to say that.
Oh yeah,
So
for sure.
if we define sports in early development, like high school backwards, as the reason to do it is to develop teamwork, is to develop the ability to work in a system, the ability to deal with people that are different than you, right? Like, so white kids playing with black kids, Latinos playing with Asians, right? Like understanding that we are coming together to try to accomplish a goal. And even if we don't accomplish that goal, there's value in trying, and there's value in attempting this together. And there's a tremendous amount of benefit that goes into what kids get out of that system. Almost none of it is like financial at that era, right? Like you can maybe talk about high school sports a little bit as you're going to college, and like, you know, opportunities in order to get like scholarships to go on to become, which that becomes monetary value. But in large part, we're talking about things that benefit every type of person. And so like when you look at even female rights, when they were trying to get access to some of these sports, because women weren't even allowed to play some of these sports, right? And so even just to get female team sports, they had to go in and fight for this shit, right? And they have to say, like, we should have access to the same thing, right? We should have access to these kinds of programs because it's very beneficial for our children, right? Along with that, you have to understand that transgender people make up, as we just found out, you did the math there, 1% of the population and are extremely dispersed, not uniformly across America. So if you have one transgendered person in fucking Oklahoma, right, that person is ostracized from the job, right? They will be ostracized. They will be picked on. They will be abused. The suicide rate for those children is extremely high.
Pre or
I
post medication?
Both. They die before they get to medication. They die during so recently they just passed the law that said that it's okay to go back to doing the pray the gay away programs, where you try to really get people away from being gay by going through religion psychology programs, essentially. Like the death rate, suicide rate for these kids is very, very high. The problems that they encounter in society is very, very high. One of the areas in which they can bridge that gap is through sports, is when they find a team that they are able to rally around together, and the school supports them, they're on the team, everyone's working together. Many times in these situations where you see these flare-ups with teams, the school that has a transgender kid don't hate that kid. They fucking love that kid. They're like on board with this kid being a part of their team. And they're happy to try to see this kid brought into their communities. The problem comes from external people seeing them. Like, that's not fucking fair. And then all this external like tidal wave crashes down upon them. So again, the number of transgendered women, and I think we care more about transgendered women in general as a society than transgendered men, the other way around, which is a whole kind of another separate can of worms that you have to talk about. But like the
Well, they're
population
not trying
size
to play in men's sports.
the
Men are trying to play
population
in
size
women's sports, not the other way around.
population that's not true. There are women just like the girl that got beaten in the thing. There are women that play in men's
She was a
sports.
woman playing in women's sports, and there was a man on the other side of the ring.
Oh, my bad then. Yeah, no, but I you can look it up. I'm fairly certain there are. Maybe I'm incorrect about this, but I guarantee you could probably find cases of female transgendered that were men, or sorry, that were female that became men that are trying to play in men's sports. I don't think that is something that is unheard of. I think that's if you want to look at like
I've never heard of
the
it.
difference in number. I know you haven't heard of it because that's not what that side of the
here.
aisle cares about. They care about the men coming in. It plays better to talk about that side of things.
Well, because it's not happening. That's why we don't care about
So
it.
look it up. Look it up.
Yeah,
No,
man.
if you look it up and like that's not a thing that never happens, I'll say okay. I'll admit when I'm wrong. I'm confident that there are transgendered, like female at birth, who have become male that are trying to participate in men's sports. I would find it shocking if that were not the case. How good they're doing is another question entirely. But
All right,
that's also another
this one.
reason.
There are people trying to compete in men's sports.
No shit. No
but
shit. But no one cares about that.
Less common and far less controversial. Interesting.
Well, that's controversial, yes, because no one cares about that because there isn't the perceived. Again, you can talk about the sexism of this as well, right? A lot of these conservative guys who are talking about these female rights are the same guys that talk about like abortion rights and things like that, where it's like males dictating to females what their gender should be protected against, right? There's this like we are men and we can't allow men to do, and it's like, has anyone talked to females about this? There are a ton of female athletes who are super pro transgender. There are a ton of female people who are not anti-trans in the sports. You know what I mean? Especially given how small their number are. But so again, to go into all of these different issues, right? To talk about the first one in that early childhood through high school era, the benefit, the reason we do it is to make them understand all the benefits, which there is no reason a trans person being involved in sports at any level affects that. I can't name it for me. Like what does them being involved in that hurt the other team's ability to learn about competition, about playing together?
It depends on the level and the sport. I mean, wrestling is a tough one.
Through high school, through the bottom one, right? And also, so the female, there are female wrestlers who wrestle in male wrestling leagues, right?
Yeah.
Like that thing. Like if you guys have not seen that. So it already happens that females can wrestle in male wrestling leagues. Like that happens pretty consistently. And sometimes the females win. It's a thing.
It's true. So, but then sometimes the males also just kind of forfeit.
Yes, but Yes, because they're too like embarrassed to fight against them, right? So, but to go back to this,
Embarrassed. I
18
don't know
to
about
like the early
embarrassed.
one, 18 to early, elementary school sports, right? What is the harm that is done by allowing, especially when the teams themselves are on board with allowing these people to participate? What is the harm that is being caused by allowing them to participate in these sports?
To who?
The victims that the Republicans say exist because transgender people are being allowed to do this.
Well, usually it's the women being
In what
being
way?
affected by this. Well,
So
typically
but
you
everyone on
have
their
like,
team are totally okay with it.
That's
well,
assuming everyone is okay with it, right?
Sure, but let's just for this particular, we can talk about when it's not, but for this particular instance, let's talk about that because there are, I
sorry,
know of cases in which
rephrase the question. I was typing and looking at stuff over here.
sure. What is the harm that is caused by allowing transgender people, both male trans and female trans, to be included in sports? And I won't even add my carry on there. Just full stop. What is the harm that is caused by allowing them to engage in sports from high school down through elementary?
Well, I think opportunity might be one of those things. If
Okay.
you're talking about, hey, my girl could have been here, but she got cut because this, biological male was better than her because he's more physically capable. My
Mhm.
daughter missed out on an opportunity to join a team for whatever reason. She was cut. So it's
Okay.
potentially
So let's
opportunity.
talk
And
about
then
that.
also it might be like a safety thing, physical safety.
Okay.
If
So
boys are naturally rougher, and if
w- let's talk about the
it's like,
first one
what
first.
about
Then we
that
go.
volleyball player that like it totally wiped out that one chick with a spike, and I think he busted her nose or something insane. I forget where it was. It
So
was
okay, hold on. Before we get into the safety thing, let's not jump ship. So the first one, right, which is saying it's not fair because like what do we get? You guys were in sports, right?
mm,
My understanding, but especially at like most levels, right? Like, and until you get into like, you're like the higher tiered versions of like high school sports and stuff like that. Fucking nobody gets cut. Nobody's getting cut. What do you like?
what do you
That's not
mean?
really a thing that
There's always
happens.
an A team. There's always a B team. There's what are you
There's the
talking
A
about?
team and the
People
B
do
team,
get
but they
cut. So
don't get cut.
opportunity is a valid
Like
argument.
the sports, they will move them to whatever tiered. They don't refuse to let them play the sport. Generally, when you look at high school backwards, maybe it goes to B team, maybe whatever else, right? Even sitting on the bench, but you're
There are
practicing, you're doing
still
all these other
limited
things, right?
seats
Team sports
on
being
even in high
in
school.
a
Even
lot
in
of
high
schools,
school, there's limited seats, and even in high school.
in a lot of in a lot of schools, it is very hard to even find enough people to staff the fucking teams, especially like female teams for certain sports. So, look, and I'm not saying that that is something that couldn't happen, but what I'm trying to say is like when you look at the number of trans people, when you look at the sports, the reason why people participate in sports to begin with, and the general habit of schools to try to provide some sort of team for them to play that sport on, because schools don't, they don't, uh, their mission is to support the kid through their exploration of sports and education. Their mission is not necessarily to win at the sport game, right? Like when you go into private sectors, when you're talking about like private leagues and things like that, that's an entirely different concept, and those are completely different rules. So we have to talk about public schools specifically, and we have to talk about the reason why sports exist in those systems to begin with. And the reason they exist in those systems to begin with is to have those kids participate in sports for the benefit that they get out of them, right?
If
Out of
that was
those.
true, all of the sports would be co-ed.
Well, so but okay, so here's the thing. I think that you could even make some arguments for, especially early on, when before puberty, like in elementary, like you should have co-ed sports. I don't think there's a reason why you shouldn't. Like one of the
Even
reasons we
before
don't is
puberty,
because
dude. I think for the most
so
part,
one of
their
so one
kids
of
are
the reasons
even go for it. Go for it.
so one of the reasons why we don't do any of that, right, is the religious history of this country, the general like way we have fought about this for generations, right? Again, female rights are brand new. Like we weren't even allowing them to participate in sports. We're not that far removed from mom
I know,
going to the beach
but we can't forget
and
about
having somebody
biological
walk with a
differences.
ruler to measure how far their skirt is down their leg. Like we come from a prudish thing. So we haven't even considered these things as possibility done research or understood what the pros and cons of these things are. So your question, Adam, why there isn't, is like, that's why there isn't. There may be some other reasons. Maybe there are some actual like physical things that you would be afraid of, but most sports,
there is.
yes, maybe. Most sports are not.
There is. Men generally
football, my
have a
guy.
physical
Like most
advantage
sports are
over women.
basketball. Most sports are baseball, right? Like those sports are not sports in which you're punching each other in the face. So like when you talk about sports,
even Serena Williams comes out and says, if I played a male athlete, I would lose consistently. Serena Williams is arguably one of the best female tennis players
I'm
ever.
not making the argument. What I'm making the argument of is that winning is not the point of early childhood sports. That's not the point. The point is to get them, kind of like you're talking about the civility, it's to understand that you are part of this team, like how to work together, how to try together.
If winning wasn't a part of sports, there wouldn't be participation trophies.
You're working together to win, though. Like winning is a part of it. You're working together as a team.
You're working together towards victory.
And as I said up in the beginning of this, how many, and you both admitted to it, so don't try to back out now. What is the difference of your team coming up against a female team that has a trans on it, that beats you in part because they have a trans person on it, versus coming up against a team who hired trainers and had better equipment and was and genetically just had better people on their team?
Well, it depends on the circumstances. If you're an entire girl team and all of a sudden there's like a lineup of males, biological males, there's a little bit of a difference there.
One team where there's a lineup of biological males, Frank. Find it.
Transgender?
Retarded. It's insane to have these conversations at some points. Like these hypotheticals just don't exist.
So then what is the proposition that every school it's okay to have transgender athletes? Anything that's in outside of school that is a more competitive class, that's like the higher tier, that is not part of a school but like a traveling team, the more competitive teams that you can join as a minor. And then in college, is that okay? Like what are you proposing?
And that's why, like, I think you have to look at these things individually. So for the early childhood education, I think that for all the reasons I said, I think that it should be allowed, especially in the areas in which the teams have no problem with it and it's outside groups that are agitating to get them removed. But I don't see any logical reason why you shouldn't allow them to exist within those sports. Once you get to college, it becomes interesting, because college, and the reason it becomes interesting is less about the monetary. Well, it's not really less about monetary. It is the scholarships, right? It is the way that people get into college through sport, right? And so in that space, I think that you have real legitimate questions and concerns about male at birth people taking up scholarships that would go to female gendered people. I think that's a valid conversation to have. I think there's definitely some argument to be said that we need to make sure that people don't abuse this. There's two sides to that. One of them is I am a man. I'm a straight man, and there is no scenario in which I would undergo gender reassignment surgery and take on all of the abuse, all of the hatred, all of the hormonal problems, the surgeries, all of the negativity that I know is going to come my way for the offset of a scholarship or even like a professional career. Like, maybe that's not true for you, Frank. Maybe you would chop your dick off tomorrow if you thought you could make it big in the WNBA. But like most guys, if not all guys, that is not something they would do, right? Like that's not the motivating force behind switching your gender. And so when you make this blanket statement that like men are participating in female sports because they want to win, is nonsensical. Like the amount of
I think that the argument you just proposed is also nonsensical, because you have no data as to whether or not the people that are competing in these women's sports are either pre or post surgery. I don't know
if there is data. Do you know if there is data? I would
No,
imagine there
no,
probably
no.
is
But
some amount of
you're
data
saying
out there.
that, the reason why, like, there's no reason why anybody would go through
Okay,
this
so
lengthy
even
process of
okay,
the
so
surgery in order to do this if that wasn't like their intent isn't
so
malicious,
fair point.
right?
So fair point that my statement was overbroad, even though you don't have data to support that there isn't that data.
Mm.
But let's say that I was being overbroad. Even if even if to me, again, and this is me speaking for me, I'll speak for me, and then I'll let you guys comment on this as fellow men. There is not a situation in which I would or not even consistently, because maybe that's being overbroad for Frank too. There is not a way where I would portray myself as a female that at least appeared earnest to most people in order to get on a female team to win, knowing the backlash I would get from all of the males in my life, all of the general society, and if news media picked up on it, just for the scholarship. Like the black mark that puts on me as a man is substantial. That's not an
That doesn't have to be your motivation
Yeah,
for it,
your
though. It could
intent.
just be the result of
Yeah, it's
no, but
objectively, is it
transition.
moral or not? It's not about the intent. It's arguably, it's objectively right or wrong. It's not about the intent
no,
necessarily. If my
no,
intent to rob that bank was to feed my children and do all this,
it makes it
is
less
that now
morally wrong.
right to do that? No, it's not.
It makes it less morally wrong. Yes, it does. Like that, morality is not legality. Those are two separate things. Don't conflate them. Like
Sure.
morality is about intent. Everything is about intent. So, like, yes, like intent is important. But like the claim that right wing people make that there's a rash of men that are pretending to be trans in order to get in and own people in women's sports. And this is, I'm not saying that's what's happening because I don't think that's what's happening.
That's what's
If
happening.
if
That's
the
what's
claim,
happening.
Frank says that's what's happening. So
If
Frank
the
says there's
claim is-
intent, who cares?
if the claim is
because that's not
if they're
the
doing
intent.
that in order to
You're right.
gain an advantage, that's a ridiculous claim because obviously they're not. That's
Frank
not why
mentioned
they're
that claim.
going through a transition. They're going through a transition because they don't feel like they are the biological sex that they were born at.
Yes.
But having an advantage in sports is a result of
Yes.
having a transitioning
and
or
that's
a
why I'm
disadvantage,
saying-
whichever.
Yeah. And that's why I'm saying, like, the nuance here is like, stop making the claim that the reason they're doing this win. The reason they're doing this is because they are identifying as a different gender. They're going through this process. They're taking on extreme negative reactions from other people in order to be who they are. The knock-on effect of that is that they're displacing women in women's sports, and we got to talk about that, right? And so, like, again, when we look at college sports, I think when you look at scholarships, even it's an interesting thing where, like, I think we need to figure out some sort of a way to ensure that trans people are as supported equitably as every other minority, and that they have access to scholarships that will help them get into colleges at equitable rates to other minorities and other white people. And I think we need to protect the existing scholarships for female at birth people. That was the intent of those scholarships. That was what they were trying to support. I think you can state that and not be anti-trans, right? I'm not anti-trans. I don't think you guys would consider me anti-trans, but I think, like, you need to look realistically at the financial incentives here being equitable, and that we need to make sure that trans people are supported, but that also women are supported. And in some cases that needs to be separated, right? And then the second part about college sports is that, like, college sports is scholarships to get education, but college
Some people
sports
are
is
trying to make a
also about
living, not just education.
Yes.
Or they're trying to make a living out of it.
Yes, and college sports also then becomes professional sports, right? Which is a pipeline that goes through college into professional sport. And so, again, if you are allowing trans athletes to take up space that female athletes would take up otherwise, that possibly minimizes their exposure to the recruiters who then go on to become professional things. Now, a lot of nuance in that, including the fact that, like, the percentage of people that become professional out of college sports is tiny. It's not a large amount. And even if you, again, 1% of the population, and how many of those go on to be college athletes, tiny amount. So even if you had a team that had 2 trans people on them, you would still have 5, 6 other females on the team that were good that could get put into professional sports. Once we get to professional sports, there aren't public funds anymore. So it's not a public issue. It is a private issue about that company and what it wants to do. Like, yes, we could try to regulate that. But in my opinion, it's a public enterprise. And if they want to be female at birth only, they fucking can be that. They're a goddamn private company and they have everything to do that. Right. So professional sports has no bearing on this debate. College sports has a bearing on the debate insofar as it refers to scholarships and maybe exposure to professional ability. And then pre-high school backwards, it has, in my opinion, like zero importance on the conversation, right? And that's the subtle nuance, because like I would be called anti-trans by some people for making those statements, and I would be called like extremely pro-trans for making those statements, right? Like the nuance here is you have to look at each one in its own light, and you have to come to a rational decision based on logic, not emotion and fear baiting and mongering. And that's just the first one, right? That's and then we can talk about the bathrooms and the prisons and the IDs, and you can apply the same logic to each one of those, and you end up finding that there's a lot of smoke with Republican claims about how bad this is, but there's very little fire. And what fire is there is not warranted of this national whip-like overreaction to the problems that exist through trans people. It just doesn't. It just absolutely doesn't. But the Republicans look, because it's culture war and it feeds their fire, which is what they fucking want.
I agree with a lot of that. I think the public school thing is still
you can debate it, and there's a valid debate there.
Because in general, I don't think that the separation of boys and girls in sports is only because women were introduced to sports recently. I mean, boys are in general more athletically, they have an athletic advantage over girls.
They're built differently.
I don't know. I don't have the answer. I don't. I think that, of course, transgender should be represented and included, but in order to make it fair for everybody, I don't know what the answer is there. Unless you want it, unless there's a co-ed, have a co-ed, and have that, everybody can join that. So when it gets into the class A and class B, where people do care about winning more than in the co-ed, generally in sports, at least that's what I've seen.
So here's my main argument, and I'd love to hear your thought on it, which is that you were just talking about that, like, so that it's fair, right? Because fairness seems to be the reason to keep them separate in that line of thinking, right? My basic proposition is that generally sports is not about teaching people fairness. Like it can be taught through like obeying the rules, but even through engaging with sport in different teams in different areas, you will come up against another team that is just better athletically gifted than you, or that has done more training, or that had better opportunities than you. Fairness is a moving target that is, you are never guaranteed fairness. You only ever guaranteed your effort level and your ability to try to follow through on what you wanted to do. And
I think it's a good way to keep it equitable, though. You want to make sure that you're getting equal opportunity as you would anywhere else, because that's one of the things that I feel like Democrats constantly complain about is this needs to be equitable. We need to have equal representation, equal this.
You're using two different words there. Equal and equitable are not synonymous. So let's just start there. Equitable is different than equal, right? Equal means everybody gets the same.
Fairness, I feel like, are pretty close.
Equity and fairness become closer, right? Because you're trying to state that like we should provide what people need that is based on like a fair outcome. So sports are not designed to teach fairness. That doesn't mean our rules shouldn't be designed to teach fairness or to include equity and fairness principles. But equality is very different than equity, right? And what I'm trying to say is that the benefit of sports is not in ferreting out or imparting in kids the belief that there's a fair system. The point of sports is to teach kids that despite unfair disadvantages, the value here isn't in winning, it's in trying. It's in not giving up. It's in the relationships you make. It's in all of the intangible things about sport and being a part of society. That is why we give sports to kids. That is why we give sports to high school age kids, because that is hugely important to every gender and transgender and age group and religion and race of people, is to learn those concepts. So, like, there for what I'm talking about, like, I think in order for us to have a rational conversation on this, sociologists and people who do the very serious work of compiling data and trying to understand issues at at scale have to look at like, okay, how many schools exist with trans people? What is the trans population? How many women are actually being displaced by all of these things? And do it in a dispassionate way that isn't being tainted by people who are trying to get one side or the other across, right? If there's a
Yeah, you need
real
the evidence.
problem, even in when we looked up the numbers of that shit, like, it was hilarious that you're like, what's the number of transgenders, right? And it's like, well, 0.8% in adults, but 3% in children. Like, and then you do the math, and it's like, well, actually, it's 2% of population, right? So, like, depending on how you want to look at that data, you can make an argument that something is more serious or not, which is the problem with politics when they're trying to use it as rage bait for getting you to believe one thing or another. Like, it's not wrong to say 3% of children are trans, but people take that, and most people don't make the correlation to be like, oh, wait, but what percentage of the population is that, right? Like, and they won't ever try to understand the data at a more nuanced level. So, like, understanding the actual impact, is there an actual problem here? And if there is an actual problem, you're taking reasonable steps to ensure equitable behavior, not equal, and not like gender-based stereotyping, right? Like, that should be the goal. And I think having a nuanced conversation can't happen right now because of how heated that topic is based on the political atmosphere.
Yeah, it's very true. You need the data in order to make
Mhm.
and make a decision. I mean, I think that's the the most rational way to go about it. The only
Yeah.
right way to go about it, really, because
Yeah, and
otherwise you're just going
Emotion.
off of claims that you don't know if it's true or not. You know?
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree, and like one of the things that I would say, which is this gets into the like states' right versus federal rights too, because we can start going down that path of like, okay, fine. If you're California, you want to make these rules, fine. Texas doesn't want to do it, right? Is
I
it
was thinking the
allowable
same
for
thing.
Texas to have a
Yeah,
rule that says no, where California says yes, right? And that debate is tough, right? Because when you look at like the constitutional claims to the protections of transgendered people in our society, right? There is some level of interpretation that has to happen because those laws were all written in a time that transgender people didn't really exist, or at least weren't existing in a way that was visible, right? And so they have umbrellaed them under gender terms and other things like that. And I think that where we probably need to get to, if just from my insane leftist liberal mindset, is getting wording added to the Constitution that would protect them federally and explicitly call out that you do have to protect them, at least within certain bounds and rights. Because
an
as we,
amendment.
yeah, an amendment or an amendment to an amendment, essentially, just to like update the wording to provide it, not getting or like adding a new one or like removing one, but just editing some of the wording. Um, that in order to again give protections, because what we've seen is our overbroad
Do you think
interpretations
that'll ever
of.
happen though?
I mean, I would like to think it would. I think it needs to, but I don't know that both, but not now. Definitely not now, and not with the Supreme Court, or not for the next like 15, 20 years. But like we'll have to revisit this at that time, But like what I'm saying is like what we have seen with this court is that um, are assuming that the traditional view of how we've understood the Constitution will be picked apart. And sometimes you can look at like the birthright citizenship, you can look at Roe v. Wade, you can look at a lot of these things where precedent was set. We interpreted the laws to mean one thing, even though the wording wasn't necessarily specifically calling out for in art, especially in like our version of English, it wasn't calling out for the protections as we interpret them today. And what ends up happening is that those protections that we have been granting to people and that the Supreme Court has been upholding can be reversed based on a different interpretation because the wording is so overbroad and old timey, and it is just open to people fucking with it. And so,
I
like,
yeah.
how you get there is tough because you got to like in order to do like and there's a reason why making amendments is very fucking hard because we can't just do it willy-nilly. So yes, you would have to have a big wealth support to do these things, which just does not exist in today's society. And so like it is improbable, if not impossible, at least for the next 20, 30 years. But
and I think a big problem is there is wording of God in the founding documents, which can be
yes,
it doesn't specifically say Christian God, but the
or
founding
Jesus.
fathers were largely Christian, not all of them. And then if with associating anything homosexual with being evil, then it just adds fuel to the fire for transgender homosexuality to be just not acceptable in our country. You know, that's where it gets tricky too.
Not just unacceptable, like you said, evil. You know,
evil.
Yeah, well, and
right.
you know,
So it
right
makes it
now,
even more difficult.
Right now, I think in your home state, Mr. Frank Jimenez, the beautiful Texas government that exists there is attempting to enforce reading of Bible stories in history classes for I want to say elementary through high school is what they're trying to do. And they're trying to get away with it by claiming that, like, well, in order to understand American culture and American history, you have to
Which is
read
a
Christian
Christian
Bible
history, right? As
Yes,
Adam just stated.
right. It's this blatant. It's like they're not even talking about any other religion in these classes. They're overtly picking and choosing which scripture documents to read in history classes.
I could care less.
Like,
my kids are going to be homeschooled, so I don't care what the schools do.
well, but this is the society we're building is a problem. Like you don't care about your kids. Like I would teach my kids one thing, and like I'm not overly worried about like my kids, but like I religion in this country is interesting to say the least. And like it is ebbed and flowed. Like we've gone through periods of high religion and low religion, right? And we've been trending downwards since the late 1900s. Like America has been getting less religious as a general principle and kind of more atheistic as we've improved into the modern era. But we have seen a resurgence recently, and especially amongst young white men in particular, of this like re-embracing of Christian in particular ideologies and a fervor there that this needs to be the doctrine of America, that like we have to be led by a Christian theocracy essentially, that like and I've heard them talk about this, that like we need to institute, like the problem with America today is our ungodliness and that we need more control from religious authorities and less from secular authorities, right? This is massively fucking problematic in my mind. And like religion, I will start just on a tirade about why religion is in general a pretty horrific thing, especially when it comes to dictating of what people like morality and dictating of what people can and cannot do, and about dictating the rules and laws of society. Like almost everything that we've built has come out of an original understanding that was given to us by a religion, whether it's Christianity, Judaism, Islam, all these things, but has been improved upon through like rational philosophical thought and through like application of science and the enlightenment of humanity that rejected most of the dark age tenets of Christianity and most religions. Most religions that exist today that are like conducive to modern society are super benign, and they mainly stick to only themselves and their group of people, and they don't try to insist upon the rest of society in general that they have to agree with what we're saying or we're going to kill you, right? Like that, like you look at the religions today that do that, right? Islam is one of them for many countries in the Middle East, right? Where this is still like a pretty like in some countries in the Middle East, if you become an apostate, if you reject Islam within that country and you are a member of the country, that's death. They will kill you. Like that's how serious that shit is still. And Christopher Hitchens once said this, which is that like, let us never forget what religion did when it had all power and authority to dictate what they do to us in the light of their newfound benevolence and grace. Like saying today that like Christians are nice or that like Jews are nice or any of these things is to ignore what they did when they had all the power and when they behaved barbarously towards people and murdered and tortured and facilitated the most heinous crimes in the names of their gods. So like in no part should religion be involved in the structure of society at a fundamental level. I think that like when we look at separation of church and state, there are some people who make argument that like there were reasons why they did that weren't specifically anti-religion, but it is fundamental bedrock that we have to get away from this dark age superstition that still persists among the masses of our society and that they use to sweepingly dictate how we should orient our lives. It's mental insanity. But that's my extreme atheist belief.
But you can also say that those were just different times, just like how, the United States came to be through mass genocide and murder, right? The United States is here. We're not perfect, just like any other religion or anything else that began. It was never perfect. And then it's progressed. And now it's like, we're not, like you said, we need to keep moving forward, not keep looking back at, the issues of the past. We can learn from the issues of the past, but we have to move forward.
Okay, but so here's the thing with religion, right? Which is that religion only ever looks to the past. When someone justifies why gay people are immoral and sinful, they're not using a modern day rationale for that. They're quoting Bible scripture that was made back in the fucking dark ages, right? Like they're picking and choosing what scriptures to listen to dictate what we do today based on outdated bullshit that had nothing to do with our current understanding of the world. Like when we look at what religion was, right? Religion described things that we didn't have the scientific or mental understanding to describe. So again, Hitchinson talks about this pretty well, where he says like, or sorry, not Hitchinson, it was the other guy. When you see a leaf fall off of a tree, why does that happen? You invent a story. And the story is, well, there's a god of the wind and they command it to blow, right? When you look at every religion, it is designed through the lens of how we view ourselves. That's why God is a king. That's why Jesus is the Lord, right? These are human terms that describe human understandings because that's all we understood. So like, why does everything exist the way it does? Well, we're human. We understand what we do. So clearly all of this had to be somebody doing something. So we start making up stories and say, yes, this God does this because of that. And Apollo takes the sun across the sky and God does this and Jesus does that and the devil does it. We ascribe all of these gods and superstitions to natural phenomenon. And then as we got more and more enlightened, we realized, oh, well, the wind is actually because of this. And the rain is because of this. And the tidal forces are because of this. And volcanoes explode because of this. And earthquakes because of this. And suddenly religion has no bearing on anything. Like it has nothing to offer us. It didn't describe anything correctly. It described everything.
You could also say that, the argument to that is like, oh, well, what makes the wind do what it does? Oh, well, who's to say that there isn't a Lord governing that? Like, who's to say the other way around isn't true either?
So there's a book there called
The Circular Argument.
Well, it is a circular argument, but the point is it's a circular argument being given to us by religious people. They have no proof that it's a God, right? Their question that they're putting forward is, but where did it come from, right? And the problem is, even if you say, okay, it's God, it's like, where did the God come from, right? Like, it doesn't answer the fucking question, right? And if your answer is, well, God always existed, why can't we just say existence always existed? Why are you adding a layer of unnecessary?
Well, the counter argument to that is that it came from nothingness. Well, where did nothingness come from? Did nothingness always exist? Or you're saying that nothing created everything? Like,
my point is, you can always, and we talked about this before, you can always regress further into a conversation when you don't know an answer. But not knowing an answer is not the same as saying, God told me through this revelation that this is what happened, right? That is very different from saying, we just don't know. Right. And so somebody who is religious saying we think that God exists is stating that they have some factual basis for making things. When atheists or scientists say, we have no proof that God exists, that means we don't have any fucking proof. You're not offering anything that is remotely tangible to reality. It's no different than a unicorn or Zeus or any other religion you want to believe in, right? Like they have the exact equal claim to reality as the Christian God or the Jewish God or the Islam God, Hinduism, Buddhism. Like all of these things are fictions that we've invented to answer a question that we didn't understand. And as we, again, as I pointed out, like as we started understanding natural phenomenon, we needed them less and less, to the point now where the only domain of religion exists in the infinitesimal point of the origin of everything. That is the only possible claim that it can make to some sort of like enlightenment to give us anything, because we've pushed it, we've forced it backwards out of real physical space, away from rational minds and towards the only unknown thing that is left, right?
What do you make of Einstein's quote where he says, "The more I understand about the universe, the more I believe in God," or something like that?
So, if I'm not mistaken, I read somewhere that that's actually not the correct quote. That they put there was some sort of thing with the quote there. But I do know that Einstein said, "The only God I believe in is the God of Spinoza," and many many scientists. There, first off, there are physicists and things that will believe in God, right? It's interesting that most, if not all of them, believe in God, and but will also openly admit that like that belief has nothing to do with facts. That is entirely in the realm of faith and entirely in the realm of essentially make believe, right? Like they want to believe it because they want to believe it. They want
At least subjective and experiential.
correct. The God
Which
that like
is not necessarily make believe.
no, I will
To
call
be
it make
fair.
believe. But subjective is not necessarily make believe, but we have no proof that any of this exists, and every proof that we have shows no proof that it exists, and our proofs are considerable. But the God that Spinoza specifically talked about, which is an interesting God, and the one that Einstein kind of said that the only God I believe in is Spinoza's God, and some other physicists have said this, is Spinoza put forward that that what God is the material of the universe, and that everything that exists is only a variation on that material, and that what God is everything, right? It's not a person or a being. It literally is, right? There's no consciousness. The consciousness could maybe be a part of it, but like it is literally just everything, all the physical, mathematical equations of physics and everything that is what is, right? The chemical formulas, all that.
Sounds a lot
And
like Taoism.
there's a
Taoism.
lot of through lines to some other religions, right? And even like it's very interesting because at the time, right, they wouldn't have known about like because this was back in like 17 something 60s or somewhere around there. They wouldn't have known a lot about like the chemical elements and things like that, right? Which like the basic understanding of how the universe started, right? It's a big bang happened, it exploded and have some version of like photons crashing into each other, which created like the first like protons and neutrons of like the universe within the first like nanoseconds of explosion. Those various like protons and neutrons started being caught together, which formed the basis for the periodic chart of elements, which is what everything is made out of, right? And so like what's the difference between gold and aluminum? It's an addition or subtraction of electrons. Like that's all it is. Like there is no inherent difference between elements other than their addition or subtraction of I believe it's electrons, right? And so like in some ways, like he was somewhat correct without even knowing how correct he was, that everything is made out of electrons and neutrons and protons, and that through adding or removing those, you get the spectrum that is reality, physical reality around us, right? That's how we get all of the, and then you start combining those elements into different chemical formula to get the more complicated structures of water and rock and whatever else we might have, eventually biological life and things like that. So like it's an interesting thought that he had, but the point of that thought also is that defining God in a way destroys almost entirely man-made religion. None of it makes it's still all make believe. It's still all nonsensical. It does nothing to further a thinking, sentient being who cares about you personally and who cares about what you do in bed and who cares about how you associate and how you treat your slaves and how you organize your society. That God could give a fuck about us. It is the bedrock of existence. It does not care about it doesn't even see the minutia of our lives. And we enter into this
It's indifferent,
sops
is what you're saying.
sop what's that?
It's indifferent, is what you're saying.
Yes. It is nothing within our realm of understanding. And we have attempted to apply our individual human logic to something that is completely incomprehensible, if it even exists, right? Which there is no proof that like that. There's only proof that matter exists and that electrons and protons exist, right? If you want to claim that means that is in fact God, you can do that, but that is devoid of any doctrine or a theocratical principle that has ever been put forward by humankind. That is a scientific principle, not a theocratic one. So, like my readings on a lot of this stuff have gotten to the point where, like, I there is such little relevance for religion in our modern day society, and the people that want to ensure that it becomes relevant again, generally, I think fairly negatively of their view, in which they want it to again become a dominating force that allows the control of populations, because that's what religion has always been. Religion has always been designed by man to control man into conformity by threats or promises of gold. Like that's sticks and carrots. That's religion. And so
That's
people
what it
that
was
want
used
to
for in the
reimpose
past, I would say, for the most part, because I feel like nowadays it's more to preserve innocence and to preserve like a way of life, not necessarily to control people.
but so to prefer okay, so those are two different things. One, innocence, which what does that even mean? And in what context are you using that term? And then in terms of like preserving a way of life, what way of life are we talking? Just the belief in God, that belief in I want to be able to believe in God. You know, it's like, okay, cool, believe in God. I'm not telling you not to believe in God. I'm telling you don't teach the goddamn schools. And I'm telling you it's not a don't try to pretend it's a fact.
I
You
don't
know what I
agree
mean?
with
Like,
the teaching of the Bible in schools, just like I don't agree with,
yeah,
gender studies in school. That's for the parents to
that's right.
discuss. That's for all that kind of stuff. That's for the parents to discuss.
Okay,
Arithmetic, science, sports, uh,
sure.
English. Those are the things that you go to school for, not
So,
things that are optional.
okay, look, I don't want to necessarily derail too hard on that point, but like, yes, right. Like, curriculum is what we need to teach people. Factual history is what we need to teach people. The difference between reality and not is what we need to teach. But part of that does involve biology. There's sex ed that gets taught in schools. Gender studies, I'm not sure even what you mean by the term. Are you talking about like college level gender studies? Or are you talking about like, what are you talking
Transgender
about? Gender?
studies.
What does transgender studies to you mean?
They're teaching different
What's
curriculums
that?
about there being different sexes and things like
So
that.
sex
And
ed is what you're saying. In sex ed, you don't want them to talk about transgender. So it's very different than like transgendered sex studies, right? Like it's very, very different. So my problem with saying like you shouldn't acknowledge the existence of trans people within the context of biology, I think misses the mark. I think you should explain it through the realm of biology, which is that what we know is that at birth you are born either with male or female anatomy. Occasionally, there's a weird thing that happens called hermaphrodism, which you kind of get both, right? Which is an interesting thing that humans do. And then sometimes people are born and through psychologically built-in mechanisms in their brain, they do not feel comfortable in the skin that they are in, and they choose to pursue an outward reflection of the gender that makes them feel most comfortable. That is what we call transgender people. Those people are not weird. They're not evil. They don't hate you. They don't want to kill you. They're your friends and neighbors, and we should respect them as much as we respect men and women. And that's all you need to know about it. I don't understand why that's a bad thing to teach to a kid. That like, hey, this is the stuff that exists out here, and you should not like pick on people for doing that because it's it's they're just people do and they just want to exist, and if you like that seems pretty reasonable to me. You know what I
The
mean?
Bible exists, but you have a problem against teaching that.
But the Bible, so the Bible dictates how you should behave, right? The existence of transgendered people is not a edict to saying you have if the teachings for transgender people to kids were everyone should become transgender, I would have a problem with that, right? Like if you were telling people that you have to become transgender or even that you should explore becoming transgender, that like if you were saying like, hey, this is something that's kind of cool and why don't you go out and get right, like those things I think become problematic. But to explain to somebody that this is a realistic thing that happens in the society is not a bad thing. That's a factual basis, which is very different than the Bible.
You mean like having like sexual pornographic books in children's schools
Here we go with the pornographic
and
books.
libraries?
So which pornographic books are you talking about? We already did this and I fucking schooled the shit out of you. So you want to do it again? We can do it again. What pornographic books are you talking about?
You schooled the shit out of me, huh?
I did. We can do it again. So, like again, if you're talking, what grade are you talking about? Are you talking about school libraries? Are you talking about early, like the books that teachers read in classrooms? Are you talking about high schools, colleges? Right? What era? Like, that's a very complicated subject that you're
Children,
brought up here.
children's books. This is not
I've
college,
heard
this is not
people.
high school.
Which one? Elementary is what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
looking for it.
So while you're looking for it, I know some of these because again, I'm married to a teacher who teaches elementary in Washington, which is a very liberal state. So I have some authority to speak on these issues. Most of the books that the parents end up having a problem with, and they call pornographic, are and most books that you read to kids at a younger age, in particular, are books that show like inclusion, right? And so you would see like a child book about a mom and dad and a kid who the kid goes and is trying to clean up their room and then struggles and then finally cleans up the room, right? Like that's a kid's story that you would read to like very young children. At the end of that, sometimes you might see like the mom and dad kiss, right? And that's a thing that happens in a lot of childhood books. And then they hug the child, and then that's the ending of the book, right? Nobody would ever think that there was anything sexual or pornographic about that, right? There are books that have been written by gay and trans people who deal with identity of gay and trans through the lens of a child story. So they simply exist, or they might have like a kiss or something like that that shows that this is a thing that just is in our world. That is largely what they refer to when they talk about like pornographic books that get shown to children. It has nothing to do with what anyone who's a rational person would call porn. It is completely devoid of that. You might be able to dig out some sort of random instance of a teacher being a fucking psycho who showed pornography to a kid. That is not what happens in schools at large. And again, it's another instance of the right generally taking this issue and inflate. Like there, you can look this one up with this whole like culture war thing. There's a Texan again. I'm fairly certain. I think it was Ron DeSantis. No, who's your wheelchair guy? Fuck is his name? Oh God, I can't remember. Anyways, a very famous Texas person who had gone on record talking about that there were substantiated claims that classrooms were providing cat boxes to children who identified as cats. This blew up. This became massive. Everyone was saying that this was a thing, that the leftists were trying to put this into every class, that this was what they were going to do. They were going to try to encourage your children to identify at whatever they wanted to. It was literally made up. It was a made up nonsensical story that went all the way to like as high as like a Texas fucking governor because these retards don't vet anything and they don't give a shit. And I'm fairly certain that person did recant and say, yeah, that was a fucking lie, even though it was a fucking lie. So like they are bald faced in what they do with this subject, which is why I get like heated about it. But like, no, as pornography is not shown to children in any circumstance in elementary school. Your definition from like a Christian prudish society where if you show two women kissing, a mom and a mom, constitutes pornography to you, that's a you problem. I'm sorry.
I don't know a lot about this subject, but I have seen, I don't know, probably clips or news articles about where parents are in some sort of like city hall and they're reading from books. I think it's in a high school, and they're reading from books, and the parents are getting offended. And if I remember correctly, the argument was if you get offended by me reading it out
The
loud, then
council is getting
it's
offended
considered
by the
pornography
books.
or something.
The council's
Does that
being
sound
offended
familiar?
by the books. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a famous line from, I forget which Supreme Court judge, which is like, what's the definition of pornography? There isn't one, but you'll know it when you hear
Know
it,
it if
right?
you
Like,
see
that's
it,
the
right?
basic
Yeah.
conversation around pornography. The problem is, right, when you start, so and actually in your there's a guy who's for Texas senator in your state, Frank, who is a liberal and who had this debate because they were trying to ban a lot of books that would have been those books that they're reading out. And essentially, they would apply a litmus test to any book, right? So you would do that. You would take the book. Anyone who has a problem with one of these books can go before the court, out a random section from the book. And if anyone feels upset about it, we ban the book. And your Texas guy who's a liberal went through them and said, okay, under this law, could we end up banning Romeo and Juliet? It talks about suicide. It talks about underage sex. It talks about kissing. So, well, yeah, technically we could end up banning that. Okay. What about like books about Maya Angelou? What about books about all of these classics that exist that talk about a lot of these subjects? Are we going to ban every one of these books from high schools? And the guy's like, well, I mean, the law doesn't specifically say that we would ban those, but what they're doing is they're setting up the ability for people to go in and ban books. And I'm sorry, I'm not for that in any fucking circumstance. If you want to control your kids, control your fucking kids. Like if there's a pure pornographic penis being shoved into a woman's ass on display at a library, fine, take that the fuck out. But if it's a book, I'm sorry. Tell your kid not to read it if you don't want them to read it. You know what I mean? Like, and if you think that those little fuckers are using the books to get the pornography and not the fucking internet, like, what the fuck are you smoking?
Yeah, right.
Like,
Yeah.
that's insane. Again,
Especially in this
like,
day, you know. Yeah, with the internet in their pocket.
Yeah, it's the libraries are what's doing it. You know what I mean? What kids go to the fucking library, you asshole?
Yeah, you should be happy they're even in there in the first place.
You know what I mean? Like, oh, you like this? Here's a bunch of fucking Yahweh, you know, like gay, porn, like anime stuff for you to fucking read. You little illiterate ass can't read anything.
Here's just one. There's plenty, but here's just one I found. I'm sure this is going to get taken down as soon as we launch it.
An update tonight on a story we brought you earlier this week about 2 sexually explicit books removed from a Lexington school library. The books in question are It's Perfectly Normal and Kiss Number 8. This joins a long list of local school districts that have removed similar books this year. I spoke to PEN America.
I've seen that exact book. That book's hilarious.
Literature of all types. And they tell me
that's a funny book.
That's happening across the country.
This campaign to remove books is quite well coordinated, so it's not happenstance that a list of books that were challenged and banned in Florida are also showing up in Utah and Missouri and Virginia. The campaign to remove certain types of books, as I said, is well coordinated. There's ways in which information is being shared across online platforms.
She says the books they see targeted for removal are overwhelmingly books with LGBTQ plus characters or characters of color that include themes about sexual health or racism.
So, I mean, I don't know if you're trying to show me that to prove your point or whatever. So I know one of those books at the very least, which the one with the like more cartoonish version, which is hilarious because I found that at a random bookstore one time and I looked at it, I was laughing my fuck. If us three had found this book, we would have fucking died. Like literally, it's like a book of a bunch of naked people, but like different types of naked people. So it's like there's a wheelchair person totally naked sitting in a wheelchair, and then there's like a big fat guy that's super naked. It's fucking hilarious. Like I would have died goddamn laughing if I found that book as a kid. As far as I saw in that book, there wasn't anything like explicitly sexual other than the nudity, which like fine if you wanted to get rid of that.
What was the point of
it was like
naked people in it though?
So when you get into some of these like super liberal thought processes around sexual identity and things like that, they can go to an extreme in which like they want to prove normality through like overexposure, and they don't see like nudity as an inherently sexual thing. And
get rid of social constructs, basically.
If we sexualize nudity, then it becomes less of a problem to society, which there's some value to that, but like realistically, that's not where we're at right now in society. And so like trying to push that, it's dumb. So like I get that.
Yeah.
Fine. That book, you wanna be like, hey, there's literally pictures of dongs and shit all over this thing, and we want to get rid of it. Like, fine, but that is not like pornography in the way you would think of it. The other book, I'm not entirely sure about, but that looks very much kind of like a high school romance book, right? That I've seen in like YA books. Like if you want to read, pick up a fucking YA book, you know, that talks about these things. There will be romance that is about like teenage people. Like that's a very common theme that no one has a problem with if it is heterosexual romance. If you're talking about like a young kid who's like in love with another kid, if it gets overly sexually explicit, that can be a thing. But
I wonder how explicit the Twilight books are
very explicit.
And I don't remember anybody.
I've read them.
Anybody having an issue. Maybe there was an issue with them, and I didn't hear about it. But
an issue, but it wasn't.
Really?
There was no organization back then to actually like nobody would have ever allowed talk of banning books back then in the way that we're doing now. So like, yeah, nobody, I know there were like Christian organizations that did, just like Harry Potter came out. There was a bunch of people like banning it in schools and shit like that. Like
really,
it's witchcraft, right? Like, how dare you teach witchcraft? That was literally what they were trying to claim. So like, you know, even though we're going to divorce ourselves from reality, like these kids are illiterate. You give them a book like Harry Potter where their literacy rates shot up because they fucking read the book. And you're like, no, what matters is Christian morals, not literacy. And it's like, yeah, here we go. Let's get back to fucking 1632 and start hanging some witches. You know, like, it's fucking wild.
Until Harry Potter came out, I would only read nonfiction books, and then that was the first fiction book that I read, and it got me into
a lot of kids.
Yeah.
Harry Potter took a lot of shit from like other authors for being like, oh, these fucking kids only read Harry Potter, and like it's not even written that well. And it's like, well, yeah, but they're reading, right? Like you're inspiring them, and then they go on to read other books because they like this book, and like that's the point of these books. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, it's most of this argument is complete nonsense. There may be some very specific instances in which, like, a particular book does show something that's inappropriate, and it gets into a library, and we want to get rid of it. Like, I guess fine, but again, like kids are not hanging out in libraries looking for this shit. Like, that's not what's corrupting your children. Like, I'm sorry, it's not.
That's true.
Yeah. And you want to pearl clutch and you know, try to be like morally superior by enforcing Christian identity onto everybody in your state, Texas, then I mean, you can try to do it. I hope to God the Supreme Court fucking shoots it down. And yes, it is funny that I said I hope to God that the Supreme Court shoots down the inclusion of God in school. That's, you know, very funny to me.
When you yourself are atheist.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Anyways, I have another clip. Let's see here.
Here we go.
This is interesting.
After this, I will have to bail too. So we'll watch this one that we talk about.
Oh. Wait, no.
There he goes. Oh, you dropped again.
Oh, damn. Yeah, it's already 2:00.
It's 4:00 over here, fellas.
Bam.
Gephardt is here with us. Julie, were you surprised when the police officer stood up?
I was. I had no idea that would have happened. So yeah, it did surprise me.
What was the point you were trying to make? Do you really think the school board didn't know what was in the book?
Yeah, so, you know, it's interesting. I've been to that board so many times, and it seems to me every time I come, it's like a surprise to them. They really don't know what's in the books. They really don't.
This is breaking up for me a little.
Didn't really even know
me
about
too.
the committee meeting that had been held.
It's pretty garbled. I can't read what you're saying.
Book. So the book had been challenged. It was going through this whole process. Met and they looked at all of those and they still decided that this is something they wanted to keep in their library. There are a couple board members that did actually look surprised.
Yeah, it's breaking up.
Surprised when I told them that and showed them that image. But really, they seem to be a little bit oblivious to what's going on. Or they don't care. The majority not, or there's a majority of them that don't care. We do have
what age kids are they talking about here?
So this is high school kids, which is 13 to 17, 18, I guess, in some cases. I have a 14-year-old and cases, but a 14-year-old, and there's no way that I would, affirm this as being something appropriate for him, appropriate for him to be reading or looking at. I mean, we know what this does to the minds of kids. It's a dopamine hit, and they want more.
It was very hard. I couldn't hear.
And it doesn't end there.
Well, I think he closed his camera
Where
down.
does it go
I
then?
couldn't hear most of that. I know Adam couldn't. You're
Well,
muted too, Adam.
potentially this is what's shaping,
But, like,
the
Again,
the
I
news
have
that we
no idea what
see
book she's
now.
talking about.
There's so much of this.
I don't even know what those
sexual
images
assault,
were.
and
They
there's-
blurred them, so I don't know
we
what
even
they
see a
wish. Did
lot
she explain what the
of
images were in
sexual-
particular?
involving
Sexual
themselves with
acts
students and minors and
were
things
being
like that. And I
committed.
just think this feeds an
we were being
industry
committed
Sure,
in the
okay,
book.
that's
but
already
She held it up, and obviously they had to
destroying
take it down
our
because it was
nation.
inappropriate in a courtroom,
Well,
but it's
forgive me.
appropriate enough to have in a kid's library.
Well, from what she said, that people didn't seem to know that that was even in there. Did she not admit that they seemed to not
Well, they
understand? that
seemed
that book was in there?
oblivious, or they didn't care. Not to
So
know,
there are a
not
lot
to
of-
mention
there
that,
are a lot of books.
potentially they may or may not have known. Who knows?
Sure.
Well, the
So,
fact that they
again-
just didn't care or they don't act to do anything on it, or you have to go through a whole.
How do you know they
logistical
didn't actually do
process
anything
do
on
that.
it? They didn't. This wasn't a report
They said-
about
well,
her
she
saying that
said
nobody removed it.
This is like the third or fourth time that they're trying to get these books out of there, but they're not doing anything with that.
Okay,
That's the whole point.
I know nothing about that book, the school board, or there's a lot in there. And like I'm saying, you can find maybe some weird one-off instances of something happening that's not kosher to like how we would all think. If that is the case, if there's a straight up porno book inside of school, I would be very much in favor of not putting it in school. That being said, her then later tirade on how this is the gateway that's providing like the fuel that is like causing rapes and molestations and teachers fucking children is batshit crazy. Again, kids don't go to the library to find porn. That's a stupid statement said by somebody who doesn't understand children, technology, or rationality. So, like, yes, get that book out of there because it's stupid to have that book in school. But let's not conflate that issue with like a general like debauchery syndrome that's going on with all of society based on this one book that's found in school. You know what I mean? And that's the problem that I have. So
It's definitely not a one-off. It's happening a lot, and it's not just
again, define a lot. Let's find the full statistics of all the books that are showing actual pornographic numbers versus the number of books that are in there. Let's look at how many of kids actually fucking check those books out to begin with, right? You're making statements without any facts to back it up based on fear because you
everything
found something.
we do here is without facts. Let's put it that
No,
way.
everything I do. No, everything you all do out there is without fact. Everything we do is with facts because you don't know, but we do. But yeah, anyways,
on that note,
yes,
I think we should wrap it.
Yeah,
that was a wild one. We went all the way from Epstein back to books and schools
to
that
Mars
are
and back.
Wars and back to the moon and back. That's honestly, we should title this episode to Epstein Island and back is what we should do. Even though that would probably get us turned down pretty quickly. Either we get a lot of attention and it would be a really good title, or it would be a terrible. But
next time we should talk about the draft.
Sure, I'm down.
Like the mandatory
Super.
draft that they're saying. I mean, isn't that already mandatory?
Well, no,
We'll talk about it later.
Yeah, let's talk about it next time. For sure.
I mean, it's already mandatory. Good talk.
Well, it's not in effect. That's the problem.